Chapter 1. Genius remembers love in 1 second, divided by small. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Strictly speaking, Luaccio was not an orphan because he had legal guardians and relatives. That was his father's second wife. Simply put, she was his stepmother. Sure enough, she was his stepmother. However, similar topics never appeared in Luoccio's mouth or in his life. Because looking at the woman who worked day and night for him and seemed to want to give her motherly love to him no matter what, Luoccio agreed with her. Of course, if it wasn't for the fact that the owner of the name added in the household register had his own legal mother and was in the best years of a woman's life, Luaccio felt that he might be more willing to call her mom. People were creatures used to avoiding sadness, and they would also get used to the people around them. In theory, no one longed to be alone. But why would I want to be alone? Luaccio wrote going out on the post-it note and stuck it on the refrigerator door. He left before the weather became hot. There were no classes at the university on the weekend. He just wanted to be alone, that's all. The streets in the morning had become lively. Probably because it was the weekend, people left early. Fathers and daughters planned to go sightseeing. Old people held hands and strolled along the river. Some people planned to exercise during the weekend to feel the vitality of life, and some people started a day of livelihood. All kinds of people appeared in Luaccio's sight and then disappeared. They were like actors on the stage of a grand opera. It was as if they were born to be the best actors to play their roles. Luaccio was used to observing, but not used to speaking. He wanted to find out what people were thinking, but he didn't want to have too much contact with people. What is this? Is this the late conflict period of youth? I just want to be alone. The neighborhood began to become lively. Luaccio shook his head and walked toward the shops that were not officially open yet. It should be quieter now. Maybe he could find 1 or 2 pedestrians and observe them. Plugging in his headphones, Luaccio listened to a song that was not very popular. Unknowingly, he had already walked into the pedestrian street. Just as he expected, most of the shops here were closed or half open. Occasionally, there were a few that were already open, but they only sold breakfast, bread, and so on. Luaccio bought 2 steamed buns and sat on a bench at the edge of the street. It seemed that no one was paying attention to him, even though he looked so strange. Trafford Buyers Club, such a name suddenly entered Luaccio's sight. Although it wasn't to the extent that he would remember everything around him. If it was a shop with such a strange name, he should have some impression of it, right? The signboard was pieced together by words. The entire facade was made of wood. On the left was a European-style oil lamp, and on the other side was a clearer display window. Luaccio could barely see some small decorations in the display window, which attracted him to walk in. There was a gorgeous doll, a small pendulum clock that seemed to have stopped spinning, an artwork similar to a grizzly bear's claw, and a tattered but particularly attractive fisherman's hat. "Customer, do you want to come in and have a look?" Just as Luaccio stopped to observe these strange decorations, a voice suddenly appeared beside him. It was an unusually pale girl who seemed to be the same age as him. Black and white, the eternal colors of the Gothic-made costume, overall looked like a woman with a sickly beauty. But Luaccio didn't have more time to pay attention to these. He looked at the other party's royal blue eyes, which were really charming. It was like a gem with a strange magic. It was like a whirlpool. When Luoccio came back to his senses, he had already walked into this strange club. He didn't even know how he walked in. It was like the feeling in a movie when the scene suddenly changed. "Customer, please have some tea." The girl with sapphire-like eyes, a slim figure, and wearing a Gothic-made costume, which was actually not uncommon in this era, served Luaccio a cup of flower tea. "Love, go, shout, say, coo, the rosella flower can make you feel at ease." People can only think of what they need when they feel at ease. "Oh, you're the only one in this shop?" He really couldn't think of what to say, but since he inexplicably walked in, Luaccio simply went with the flow. It was not uncommon to just look and not spend. It was just that this strange shop made Luaccio curious. Although he walked in, he still didn't know what was being sold here. No, the owner will come out to discuss with you soon. The girl smiled and walked into the inner hall. Owner? The owner's interest? Kiki, shaking his head, Luocho began to look at everything inside. It seemed to be a continuation of the style of the display windows outside. They were all strange and did not match at all. However, it did not feel awkward to be placed like this. Instead, it seemed to have a mysterious aura. The shop was used to entertain customers, like the Western fortune-telling houses that Luocho had seen before. The overall color was dark, and the lighting was not even incandescent lamps, but long white candles that were properly inserted in the candlesticks. It seemed that the owner did put a lot of thought into this place. The waiting time was a bit longer than Luocho expected, but curiosity made him wait. His attention was attracted by the things on the display cabinet beside him. There were 2 crimson beads that were fixed with a bracket. They looked like some kind of gemstone, and then they were covered in a delicate glass container. For some reason, Luocho imagined them as moons in the night sky. But when he thought about how there were 2 moons in the sky, and they were crimson, Luocho couldn't help but smile. Do you like this pair of crimson moons? Finally, he heard another voice in addition to the girl. It seemed to be the so-called owner who didn't want to come out. Luocho turned around and saw a well-dressed middle-aged man. To be precise, he should be a middle-aged foreign man. Different from the maid clerk, his eyes were gray, and he seemed to be very fluent in the local language. If you didn't see him, you probably wouldn't think that he was a foreigner. In addition, he was a very handsome uncle, which was also very eye-catching. I'm just looking. Luocho replied subconsciously. The owner, like the maid clerk, brought a mysterious color to Luocho. At this time, the owner smiled slightly, walked to the display cabinet, and gently took out the glass container. He looked at Luocho and said, "This crimson moon is something that only a tribe living in the ancient Latin American continent can have. The people of this tribe, once they have unbearable sadness, anger, or joy, their eyeballs will change into this beautiful crimson color. And under the night moon, they will release a beautiful brilliance. Of course, this tribe has been extinct because of this pair of beautiful eyeballs. This may be the only crimson moon that has been passed down in the world." This is an eyeball. Luocho was stunned, feeling that he was listening to a very nonsensical story. What was more nonsensical was that he actually heard all of it. But he felt that the way the owner appeared was a bit special, so Luocho asked, "Since it is such a precious thing, how much do you want to sell it for?" The owner chuckled. "This needs to be set by the customer, because this club belongs to the buyer. So, if you want to get this pair of crimson moon, please take out something that you think is suitable. Also, we don't accept any form of currency." So, this was a strange shop opened by the boss of Deepwell Ice? You don't like it? The owner didn't seem to be disappointed. He put down the things and warmly pulled Luocho to sit down again. "Then let's talk about what you want to buy." "What do I want to buy?" Luocho laughed. "I don't even know what is sold here." Shaking his head, Luocho stood up and said, "Sorry, I don't think there is anything I want to buy." "Of course, this shop is very special. I will come again if I have time." "You can buy anything as long as you want." "Of course, you need to pay a sufficient price." "So, what exactly do you want, customer?" The owner sat quietly, looking at Luocho silently with extraordinary confidence and smile. Today didn't seem to be as boring as usual. Luocho looked at the owner's eyes, absent-minded for a while. "What do I want?" Luocho subconsciously thought about this question. The surroundings became quiet, which made Luocho feel at ease. This place seemed to have become another world. He could see the pedestrians outside, but the pedestrians outside seemed to never notice its existence. He just looked at it alone, looking at it. This place. "I want this place." Luocho slowly spoke out his thoughts at this time. Of course, it was only for an instant, and he seemed to have woken up. He felt that everything here was inconceivable, and he suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. The owner's expression suddenly became weird. It seemed to be joy and expectation, but more importantly, it was urgent. Dear customer, one of the rules of Trafford's trading club, when you say what you want, then the transaction will enter the process. If you don't say what you want to pay, then I will set the price. So as you wish, I will sell Trafford's trading club to you, with your freedom as the transaction fee. The world seemed to be completely upside down, and the surroundings were swallowed by darkness. In front of Luaccio, an ancient parchment slowly unfolded. He couldn't even see the words on the parchment, but he saw his name appear on it little by little. Then it was burning. It was burning rapidly. Chapter 2. Genius 1. Second, remember love divided by little? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. PS1. Thank you for the gift from 1606021918521717, which is also the first gift this book received. Equals PS2. Please add it to your collection, although it is only the second chapter. But please support the little seedling and me, a newcomer who is watering the little seedling. Yen 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 in the following text is yen 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 in the third transaction process of the Trafford Trading Club. The buyer can only be guided. No forced selling is allowed. Reading until here, Luaccio put down the club owner's manual in his hand and thought, if this is the case, then am I, who is reading this manual, the victim of the violation of the rules? Master, your lunch. The tempting smell of borscht soup was served in front of him. Yu Yi even carefully arranged the tableware for Luaccio, then stood aside, waiting for Luaccio's instructions. Yu Yi was the mate of this club. There was one thing that Luaccio guessed wrong. That was her age was not the same as his, but quite old. In addition, Yu Yi was not a human, but a puppet made with special materials through alchemy. The reason why she looked almost the same as ordinary people, in addition to the superb alchemy, the most important reason was that Yu Ye's body sealed a living soul. This was not a joke, so Luaccio saw Yu remove her head and left arm, and then naturally put them back in front of him. According to Yu Yi, she was made by an alchemist to pay the transaction fee of a certain commodity. Then she became a maid and had served in the club for more than 300 years. When he woke up, the original boss had disappeared, but he also left a letter very carefully, explaining some things that Luaccio should know. As the target of the transaction, Luaccio will have the power to dominate the Trafford Trading Club in the future. But at the same time, he would be imprisoned here forever. There was only one way to escape from this place, and that was if someone was willing to trade their eternal freedom. Then he told them that if there was anything they didn't understand, they could read the contents of the manual. Luaccio himself was relatively calm. After reading the contents of the letter, he immediately tried to open the club's door and walked out. Then, without any obstruction, he rushed out of the club. The so-called imprisonment did not refer to the imprisonment of the body, but the shackles of the soul. So, in order to prevent me from dying, I have to offer sacrifices to the club every once in a while. Luaccio began to humbly ask for guidance regarding some of the questions in the manual. Although Yu Yi was also the property of the club and was now owned by Luaccio, she was still the owner of the club. But for some reason, when he faced this puppet, he felt unnatural. Yes. Yu Yi nodded and fulfilled her duties as a maid very well. According to the quality of the sacrifice Master offers, it will determine how long Master can enjoy it. It seems that I'm not sick or in pain. This life is really long. Luaccio mocked himself. Hearing this, Yu Yi suddenly left. Soon after, she came back with an hourglass. The hourglass was placed in front of Luaccio. This is Master's remaining time. When the sand in the hourglass completely falls, Master's life will end. No matter how cold he was, seeing such a situation, he would become a little panicked, but panicking was useless. Luaccio quickly calmed down. How long will it take for the sand to completely fall? 30 days. Luaccio felt that things were not as good as he imagined. He took a deep breath and calmed down. In other words, if I can't attract customers, I will become a dead man. Those who need it will come in. There is no need to attract them. Master, the fact that you can come here is the best proof. Yu Yi said softly. In addition, Master's former boss used some methods to leak some vouchers to the outside. If you have a certificate in your hand, you can naturally come here. So, as long as we wait patiently for people to come to the door, it will be fine, right? Yes, generally you won't die. Generally you won't die. Well, just as the letter left behind by the former boss said, he would be imprisoned here for eternity, but as a price he also obtained everything in the club. Don't worry, I'm going on a trip with my classmates. Well, the message has been sent. Fortunately, the phone can be used. Luocio said to himself, although I won't be worried, at least I won't be afraid to call the police. For this reason, it's better to turn off the phone, right? For the time being, let's leave it like this. Luocio decided not to go home for these 2 days. He had to figure out his real situation first. As for the university, it didn't matter if he didn't go to class for 1 or 2 days. After having a temporary plan, Luocio began to cheer up. Since the previous boss was able to let him replace him, then simply put, it seemed that he could use the same method to let someone else replace him. Or was there a method that had not yet been discovered that could allow him to escape the constraints of the club without having to trade the ownership rights? Thinking so, Luocio felt that he should be a greedy person. But thinking carefully after experiencing such a strange thing, if he didn't have some thoughts, it wouldn't make sense. Then he would wait patiently for the arrival of the first transaction. Luocio still had some confidence in his patience. Perhaps because he liked to be alone, he could even sit in the park in a daze for an afternoon. He didn't play with his mobile phone like ordinary people, nor did he hold a translated book in his hand. Since he was here, he should take it easy. There were not many pages to read, so Luocio finished reading quickly. He then began to carefully observe the club. In fact, the area inside the club was much more spacious than it looked from the outside. It was a 3-story structure, but if you looked from the outside, you could only see the club shop. And in fact, according to you, Yi, only some people could see it. Those who couldn't see it would only see the original appearance of the place, the original shop. Was this one of the magical aspects of the club? Luocio didn't think there was anything wrong with it. After all, he saw the horrifying scene of Yi disassembling and then reassembling. The top 3 floors of the club were the shop on the 1st floor, the living room and rooms on the 2nd and 3rd floor, of course, including the kitchen, bathroom, and other facilities. As for the bottom 3 floors, they were the storage room on the 1st floor, which was used to store general trading goods. The 2nd floor was also a storage room, which stored valuable trading goods. As for the 3rd floor, it was a place for sacrificial offerings, a strange altar. Luocio walked around the altar on the 3rd floor and then felt a kind of creepy feeling. He didn't think much and returned to the shop on the 1st floor. The altar on the 3rd floor was too strange. Just as he approached it, he felt like he was being monitored from all angles. After leaving the 3rd floor, Luocio began to calm down and recalled the situation at that time. Under normal circumstances, the possibility of him saying that sentence was almost 0. Sure enough, I was cheated. He didn't sigh, nor did he get angry. Habit was a very scary thing. Master, what did you say? Yu Yi, who was cleaning the shop, suddenly turned around and asked with doubt. Nothing. Luocio smiled and let the maid continue her work. He began to re-examine Yu Yi. He didn't know who the alchemist who created her used as a reference. He felt that Yu Yi was a mixed race between the East and the West, tall and beautiful. Of course, Luocio didn't want to deny that she had a good figure. But in fact, she was a puppet. But a living soul was sealed in her body. Then who was this soul? Why was it sealed in Yu Ye's body? There seemed to be more and more interesting questions. Thinking about it, Luocio began to habitually be absent-minded. Ding-dang! It was the sound of the bell hanging on the door. When someone walked in, the bell would ring. Luocio was awakened by the sound of the bell. He looked at the door and saw a haggard, middle-aged man. "Excuse me, is this Trafford's trading club?" Is it really possible to buy anything you want here? The middle-aged man asked with anticipation and doubt. Luaccio also saw a black card in the middle-aged man's hand. Chapter 3. Genius 1, Second, Remember Love, /go, /little? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Luaccio habitually observed his first guest. He looked a little travel-worn. Although he tried his best to maintain the basic courtesy of not looking sideways, one could still feel his uneasiness. He was wearing a black suit, but he didn't wear a tie. The buttons on his collar were also unbuttoned. In addition, the suit was a bit wrinkled, and there was a faint stubble on his face. His eyes were bloodshot, obviously because he did not have a good rest. Overall, this guest gave Luaccio the impression that he did not sleep well or simply did not sleep at all. He was in a very sleepy state. In addition, he sounded like a local. Well, that was all he could know for now. Luaccio secretly nodded in his heart. Then there was no then. Let's take a look at the environment here. The guest came in with the club certificate in his hand, which obviously showed that he knew more or less about the situation of the Trafford's trading club. Then, as the new boss, Luaccio remained silent after looking at him silently. He did not know what to do next. Should he greet the guest? But how should he greet him? Should he learn from the previous boss and make a handsome entrance? The problem was that when the guest came in, he was already sitting down. Or should he introduce the things here and say something that the guest had never heard of before to improve his style? But except for the pair of scarlet moons that he knew a bit about, he could only laugh at the other things. So he had to talk to this person who was older than him about the scarlet moons was actually a pair of eyes. This was King embarrassing. He did not know what to do next. But the guest was still waiting, looking at Luaccio with an anxious look, which made him more and more awkward. Do you have anything you want? After pondering for a long time, Luaccio finally broke the silence first. You are. The middle-aged man was puzzled. This is the boss of the club. Guest, please sit down. Ye suddenly said. Although it was just a doll, it was an impeccable doll in every aspect. It even knew how to solve problems for its master. At this moment, Luaccio even felt that the most useless thing left by the former boss was that boring manual, and the most useful thing was clearly Yi, the capable maid. Unfortunately, it was just a puppet. Yi led the uneasy middle-aged man to the reception area. In fact, it was just a round table near the window. After the customer sat down, Yi walked to Luaccio's side and said softly, Master, you just need to listen to the customer's needs and evaluate whether it is worth the transaction. If you feel that the other party's offer isn't enough, it's fine to refuse. It could be considered a reminder. What a considerate servant girl. Luaccio nodded. He would be as nervous as an ordinary person, but he would not show it on his face. Probably because of his personality, Luaccio calmly walked to the middle-aged man and sat down. Are you really the boss of this club? The middle-aged man looked at Luaccio from head to toe. Is it strange? Luaccio asked back. The middle-aged man quickly shook his head, as if he was afraid of offending him. He explained, No. It's just different from what I imagined. Luaccio was always very curious. He immediately asked, Then what did you imagine it to be like? The middle-aged man said, I heard about the legend of this club from my ancestors. Even if I told my grandfather, he didn't know how long this club had existed. Speaking of this, the middle-aged man looked at Luaccio and said, According to my grandfather, he bought things here 3 times in his life. Every time he saw the boss's appearance didn't change, but he didn't seem to be a young man. Let's talk about what this gentleman needs. Luaccio said lightly. He wanted to leave a mysterious feeling to the other party. In fact, he didn't think that this would help the next transaction. He just felt that the previous boss gave him a mysterious feeling, and it seemed that he should learn from him. Hearing this, the middle-aged man hurriedly put the black card in his hand on the table. He must have attached great importance to this card, because from the moment he entered the shop until now, he had been holding it with both hands. This. I want to buy back my factory. So the middle-aged man began to tell his story. The middle-aged man was called Jin Zifu. His family had operated a large machine tool factory for several generations. He was a famous person in the city, of course, for Luochio, who didn't care much about the business circle. It was the first time he heard this name. Recently, there was a crisis in Jin Zifu's factory. That was, the factory didn't belong to him anymore, but to his son-in-law. It turned out that in recent years, his son-in-law occasionally asked him to sign some documents. At that time, because of trust, he didn't pay much attention to it. When he realized it, the factory had changed hands, and more importantly, even his property had become his son-in-law's. His daughter died in a car accident a few years ago, but his son-in-law didn't remarry. Every day, he worked conscientiously in the factory and took care of a 1-year-old child. Because of this, Jin Zifu trusted his son-in-law more and more, and because of this, he unknowingly lost everything. Ziqian, No, that bastard, he planned to tear down the factory and use the factory's land to cooperate with the developer to build a large luxury housing area. The workers would only get a small amount of severance pay. How many families? Some of them have worked in my factory for half of their lives. I will never allow such a thing to happen. Looking at the card on the table, it was completely black, and there was a golden mark engraved on one side. If he didn't remember wrongly, the appearance of this mark was 70% similar to the outline of the altar in the basement 3 levels here. But he wanted to use this card as the transaction fee. Luochio, who didn't have any idea about this card, began to feel embarrassed again. We already know what you want, sir. At this time, Yi came out with delicate teacups and teapots. After putting down the tray, she reached out and picked up the card, smiling. There's only 1 coat of arms left, and it will disappear after this transaction is completed. According to the rules, you will enjoy a 10% discount. Are you sure you want to make the transaction? If you are sure, please tell us the transaction fee you think is appropriate. Of course, whether the transaction fee is appropriate or not, it is ultimately up to our boss to judge. Yi is great. I know the rules. Jin Zifu took a deep breath and said, My grandfather told me the rules before he died. Speaking of this, Jin Zifu suddenly became silent. Luochio knew very well that he had made up his mind to come here, but he didn't make up his mind to complete this transaction. Use half of my remaining lifespan. Finally, from Jin Zifu's mouth, Luochio was quite surprised. After roughly reading the so-called boss manual, Luochio still had no idea about the operation of the club. Everything was very strange. Then, from the moment he touched the altar, he felt it was very strange. Lifespan? He forced himself to be a spectator, wanting to see how Yi dealt with a middle-aged man, to see this absurd and realistic scene. I understand. Yi nodded at this time. For human beings, lifespan is one of the most precious transaction fees. Please wait for a moment, and please close your eyes, customer. At this time, Yi suddenly stretched out a finger, gently touching Jin Zifu's forehead. Not long after, Yi retracted her arm and put on the black gloves that she had been wearing all the time. Sir, according to the estimation of your physical condition, your remaining lifespan is estimated to be 37 years. Half of your lifespan is 18 years and 6 months. 18 years. Jin Zifu's serious expression flashed a touch of fear, but he gritted his teeth and said, 18 years is 18 years. I can't let my employees suffer with me. They have a family. If this factory is gone, I've decided to use my 18 years and 6 months to exchange for my factory. Sorry, sir. Whether the transaction is completed or not, the boss will decide whether the transaction fee is appropriate. This, seeing Jin Zifu began to look at him anxiously, Luochio began to feel King embarrassed again. Decide how to decide. Maybe our boss needs some time to consider. Yi smiled. Customer, you can go back first. If there is any news, The card in your hand will give you instructions. Then, welcome to Trafford's Trading Club. Yu Yi was really great. Chapter 4. Genius remembers love in 1 second. /small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Thank you to Dream of Death SSS for your 588 and to my friends who recommended me. I'm still asking for recommendations. Yen 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 text below, yen 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 here, was the problem. What kind of formula was needed to equate Jean Zifu's 18 years and 6 months of lifespan with a factory? Yu Yi had said that the decision was in his hands. In other words, it didn't matter if he didn't agree to this deal. It wasn't because he felt that such a deal was ridiculous. He didn't believe it at all. On the contrary, it was because he believed too much in the club's strange ability that he couldn't agree so easily. Luocio had been living his life for the past 20 years. He had been a police officer all his life and had been an upright man all his life. Although his father had already passed away, he still didn't dare to forget the principles that his father had taught him since he was young. When he was young, he might have thought that his father was too long-winded and old-fashioned. However, only after losing him did he remember his childhood. Although Luocio felt that he liked lonely people, he never felt that he was different from others. There were times when he was confused and in pain. There were also times when he missed his father and hid in his bed, swallowing his tears. Why didn't he listen to his father more in the past? Why was it that he had saved his father's number the moment he bought the phone? Why was there so little communication records? Most of the time, I'm still the one being looked for, not the one looking for people. Kindness and honesty. Love go little, say. When he recalled his father's teachings, Luocio felt that Jean Zifu's business was nonsense. He didn't take revenge on society, nor did he have the concept of displeasing anyone. 20 years of teaching didn't make him feel that he was different from others after gaining extraordinary abilities. On the contrary, what he should do was to be cautious. Master, please remember that you only have 30 days. Luocio, who was deep in thought, suddenly heard Yu Ye's reminder. It was like a bucket of cold water was suddenly poured over him. He subconsciously asked, "Previously, did you often complete such transactions with lifespan as the transaction fee?" Yu Yi said indifferently, "Humans are creatures with urgent needs, but they often don't have the ability to fulfill those needs at the same time. At this time, humans can only contribute themselves. Body parts, beautiful things, wisdom, emotions, memories, even the soul. In fact, due to their self-protective nature, they are more concerned about visible losses than invisible losses. Therefore, they are more willing to use their invisible lifespan as transaction fees rather than something that can be directly taken away from them." Luocio had calmed down and suddenly said, "Trafford, devil, actually means demon, right?" Yu Yi smiled. "Master, have you decided?" Luocio shook his head and muttered to himself, "If I only have 30 days left to live, I won't let myself die so easily. Therefore, I will find a way to survive no matter who I meet. In order to survive, I should give up kindness." He looked at the display cabinet next to him. "I can't free myself from the club's shackles. Even if I reject Jean Zifu's transaction this time, I will encounter similar situations in the future. I can avoid it once, but not twice. Therefore, I should give up kindness." He suddenly looked at Yu Yi and said, "But I don't want to give up honesty. I will agree to this transaction, but the premise is that you teach me how to evaluate whether it is of equal value. Since it was Jean Zifu's will to use lifespan as the transaction fee, Luocio felt that he could only try his best to give the other party a fair product. He didn't want to dwell on the problem too much. Compared to that, he preferred to take action, kindness and honesty, but his father often said that some things should be tried rather than thought. Perhaps he would understand after doing it. Then, Master, let's appraise the value of Jean Zifu's factory. Master, please wait for a moment. Yu Yi will come out after changing her clothes." Yu Yi smiled. The servant girl went up the stairs. Not long after, she changed her clothes and came down. It was still black and white, but it changed into a chiffon singlet dress. The dress extended from the collar to the chest and between the shoulders. It was a white design. Then, from the chest to the bottom, it became pure black. The tailored skirt covered half of the thighs, and below it was snow white. Finally, there were simple silver-gray flat shoes for ladies. She suddenly became fashionable because she had a westernized silhouette. She now looked more like a model. Yu Yi appeared in front of Luoqiu. She slightly clasped her hands in front of her body and gently placed them on the lower part of her abdomen. She said softly, "Master, Yu Yi is ready. You can go out now." "Go out?" Luoqiu was startled. "Do you really want to go to Jin Zifu's factory?" Yu Yi nodded. "Yes. In addition, we need to calculate the operating situation of this factory and the number of employees. Only by restoring the original value of this factory can we provide an accurate reference for Master's consideration. We don't seem to know where Jin Zifu's factory is." Yu Yi was still elegant. "Master, don't worry. As long as you want, you can go there. In fact, it should not be very far. With your current ability, it should not be a problem." After saying that, Yu Yi walked directly to Luoqiu. She suddenly stretched out her finger and slightly straightened Luoqiu's bangs on his forehead. Her finger slid down his forehead to his cheek. She smiled slightly and finally held Luoqiu's hand. She whispered, "Close your eyes and imagine. Imagine that you want to go to Jin Zifu's factory. Then the club will respond to your request. Close your eyes. Imagine." What followed next was a very strange feeling. His body seemed to become extremely light in an instant. Soon, it became as if he had completely lost gravity. Luoqiu could not help but be absent-minded for a while. However, when he came to his senses, the gravity that bound his body seemed to have returned. Luoqiu opened his eyes. What he saw was a factory. He could also hear the roaring sound of machines coming from these factories. "This is my ability." Luoqiu looked around in surprise. Then he took out his mobile phone and located the location on the map. "In the suburbs, yes." Yu Yi said with respect, "This is the ability of the club's owner. In fact, Master, you have just taken over it. Therefore, all the abilities are still in the initial stage. However, as the number of transactions increases, these abilities will gradually become stronger. If your ability is strong enough, you don't even need to go there personally. You can grasp all the information of this factory with just a thought. No matter what." Chapter 5. Genius 1. Second, remember love divided by small? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Basically, Luoqiu was following Yu Ye's back. There should be many workers in this factory, so there should be many people walking around. However, they didn't bump into anyone on the way. Yu Yi seemed to be very used to breaking into other people's place. Why was she so skilled? Probably because Yu Yi had done many similar things and became accustomed to it. However, with the club's strange ability, it didn't seem to be too difficult to get used to it. She only needed a heart that could bear it. "Is this the general manager's office?" Yu Yi stopped. Luoqiu looked at the door plate of the room where Yu Yi stopped. "General manager's office, Chao Ziqian." Chao Ziqian. If he remembered correctly, Jin Zifu mentioned that his son-in-law's name was Ziqian. If you want to know the situation of this factory, the most simple and convenient way is here. Yu Yi smiled, directly opened the door of the general manager's office, and stood aside respectfully. "Master, please come in." Luoqiu didn't have time to appreciate Yu Ye's respect. The moment the door opened, he saw a young man looking at him with a startled expression. "Who are you?" The other party immediately asked. Society people always seem to be able to exude a sense of maturity and pressure that some students didn't have. Luoqiu was slightly stunned. Since he was already here, he could only bite the bullet and go in. After he went in, Yi also slowly walked in. Chao Ziqian, who was sitting at the desk, frowned and stood up. In his view, one of them looked like a student who didn't know anything, while the other was a very beautiful woman. That was his initial impression, and then he was sure that he didn't know these two people who suddenly broke in. "Who are you two? If there is an appointment, I should remember." He pressed his palm on the desk, slightly closer to the landline. He was neither impulsive nor flustered as he calmly said, "Please state the purpose of your visit." "Mr. Chao, my master is here to check the operation of your factory." Yu Yi smiled and walked forward. "Please." Chao Ziqian was obviously stunned. He frowned and said, "If the two of you are here to joke, then please leave. I won't allow the security to do any harm to you two." Yu Yi said, "Mr. Chao, please cooperate. Don't make it difficult for me, okay?" Yu Ye's voice was as soft as the night wind, and her sapphire-like eyes were sparkling. Under her gaze, Chao Ziqian's expression suddenly became dull and slowly said, "Oh, okay, hypnosis?" Luoqiu suddenly asked. Yu Yi nodded and said, "It's just a small trick. It can only work on ordinary people with weak spiritual power." Once again admiring Yu Ye's ability, Luoqiu also curiously looked at Chao Ziqian. He walked in front of Chao Ziqian, waved his hand in front of his eyes, and found that Chao Ziqian didn't have any reaction, so he was slightly relieved. Will he tell the truth? Luoqiu asked again. Yu Yi nodded. If it's not too difficult to answer, he can usually answer truthfully. Luoqiu pondered for a moment, then looked at Chao Ziqian. Jin Zifu said that you secretly made him sign some documents and took this factory for yourself. Now you want to cooperate with the developer to tear down the factory. Is that true? Yes. Chao Ziqian answered in a daze. Luoqiu frowned, thought for a moment, and said, "Tell me about the operation of this factory. In less than 3 months, the factory will close down." Luoqiu was even more shocked. "Close down? Are you sure?" Chao Ziqian said, "I'm sure. The factory already owes a lot of money to the bank. There are less than 3 months left to pay it back. In the last 2 years, the factory basically has no orders. Therefore, the factory can only go bankrupt, and then the land of the factory will also be owned by the bank. So you secretly took the factory for yourself and plan to make a lot of money before the repayment time, right? I can only do this. I can't just watch everything be lost." Chao Ziqian's expression suddenly became painful. "I have to protect." He seemed to be struggling. Maybe, as Yu Yi said, if the questions were too difficult, he would wake up at any time. "You, what did you do to me?" Hearing Chao Ziqian's stern voice, he nervously grabbed the phone on the desk. "Surely, call a few security guards for me right now." Luoqiu subconsciously glanced at Yu Yi. The female servant puppet that seemed to exist to solve problems for the club owner quickly walked in front of Chao Ziqian and waved her arm in front of his eyes. Chao Ziqian closed his eyes and directly fell to the ground. He seemed to have fainted. "He won't be here in half an hour. Master, don't worry." Yu Yi said softly, "Master, have you made a decision?" Luoqiu quickly looked at Chao Ziqian's desk and the situation in the office. He suddenly shook his head and said, "No, I still have a place to go." With only the black card in his arms, Jin Zifu nervously pushed open the old door of the club again. When the bell in front of the door rang, Yu Yi, with a pale and abnormal beauty, smiled and said, "Guest, welcome." Jin Zifu nodded subconsciously and saw the boss of the club sitting at the round table where he sat before. The clear water was less than a third of the cup. It seemed that he had been sitting there for a while. Jin Zifu quickly walked in front of Luoqiu and sat down. He directly asked, "Boss, about my factory." Luoqiu smiled and said, "No problem, Mr. Jin. You can take back your factory with the lifespan you want as the transaction fee." Jin Zifu's face was overjoyed, really. Luoqiu clapped his hands, and Yu Yi came forward. She held a tray with both hands and placed a pile of documents on it. Luoqiu looked at Jin Zifu and said, These are the documents that you signed and gave the factory to Chao Ziqian bit by bit. Of course, they are all original documents. Jin Zifu quickly took the documents in front of him and opened them one by one. He was excited and ecstatic. Yes, yes, these are all. These are all. After getting them back, the factory will still be mine, still mine. He treated these documents like a treasure and just held them tightly. At this time, Jin Zifu suddenly stood up. Thank you for getting them back for me. If there is a chance, I will repay you well. Luocho smiled and said, No need, this is a consensual transaction. Then, about the transaction fee of Mr. Jin. Bang! The factory is mine. My life is also mine. No one can take it away. Thank you for getting these documents back for me. Let me send you off. Jin Zifu's face was replaced with a ferocious smile. He held a black USP-45 in his hand. 45 ACP bullet was enough to cause fatal damage to a normal person's body. And at this moment, such damage obviously appeared on Luocho's body. In the center of his forehead, there was a very eye-catching wound. Luocho, who was sitting directly, fell down. And Jin Zifu, who was in a crazy state, directly pointed the USP-45 at Yi. You also go to hell. Bang bang. 2 explosions were heard, hitting Yu Ye's chest in 2 places. Seeing Yu, Yi also fell down. Jin Zifu hurriedly put the pistol into his clothes, holding a pile of documents in his hand, and rushed out of the club's wooden door. Not long after Jin Zifu left, Luocho, who originally fell down on the ground, suddenly stood up. The strange thing was that his body seemed to be supported by something, and at the same time, the wound on his forehead began to heal little by little, until it completely disappeared. He opened his eyes, subconsciously touched his forehead, and said to himself, So that's how it is before the hourglass completely falls, I won't die. He looked at you, Yi, who also fell down on the ground. He found Yu Ye's arm moved slightly, and not long after, she also slowly stood up. But the wound on Yu Ye's body didn't heal, because it was a puppet. Master, do you need water? Yu Yi asked softly at this time. When Luocho fell down, the cup was also knocked over. Luocho shook his head, reaching out to pick up the black card on the table that Jin Zifu didn't take away before leaving. The 7th rule of the club. Customers are not allowed to take away goods without permission. Chapter 6. Genius 1. Second, remember love, go, /little. Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. It was probably 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. Chao Ziqian was still sitting in his office. In fact, he even ate his dinner in the office with a boxed lunch. He hired a very good nanny, so he could rest assured and let the nanny take care of the child during this time. The light outside the office was still on. Chao Ziqian, who had just finished his work, remembered that the secretary was still waiting for orders. He was also a diligent young man. Chao Ziqian pinched his eyebrows. When he was about to let the secretary get off work, the office door was suddenly pushed open. 2 people came in, the flustered secretary and Jin Zifu, whom Chao Ziqian was very familiar with. The secretary said in a panic, General Manager, the chairman, It's okay, you go out first. You can get off work. Chao Ziqian said calmly. The secretary hurriedly went out of the room, packed his things, and left quickly. Chao Ziqian waited until the secretary's footsteps were far away before he said, Dad, why don't you rest at home? You are old. It's better to rest early at night. Don't worry about the factory. Jin Zifu snorted. Of course you don't want me to come. It's better if I never come. The chairman is just a title now. In fact, the factory is already yours. It's easy to talk, right? Chao Ziqian frowned and sat down again. Dad, some things don't need to be told. I have left enough money for you to retire. Don't we have a bungalow in the north? Maybe you can live there and don't worry about the things here. We. Jin Zifu sneered, Ba. What we? You don't have the right to call me Dad. I'm not your dad. Chao Ziqian, let me tell you, since you robbed my factory. We are no longer a family. Good boy. I have been treating you well. Since you were a small workshop director, I have been supporting you, and even gave my daughter to you. But what did you do to me? You actually want to rob my factory. Do you think that just because the factory is already yours, you can treat me as if I don't exist? Chao Ziqian took a deep breath and said, Dad, don't do too many things that you shouldn't do. There are still security guards in the factory. I don't want to make things unpleasant. Jean Zifu sneered and took out the documents on his body. You didn't dare to announce these things, did you? But now it's in my hands. I am still the rightful owner of this factory. If you have the ability, call the security guards over. I want to see if they listen to you or me. This is only a part of it. Take a good look. With that, Jean Zifu threw the documents in his hand onto Chao Ziqian's desk. Chao Ziqian's gaze swept over them. Almost all of them were photocopies, but he knew that Jean Zifu couldn't possibly have photocopies of these things. Impossible. I locked the documents in the bank's safe, Chao Ziqian said excitedly. Nothing in this world is impossible. Jean Zifu snorted coldly and said, If you're smart, then get the hell out of here. Don't ever let me see you again. Since you've contributed a lot to this factory over the years, I'll give you a way out. Old man, you forced me to do this. Chao Ziqian suddenly raised his head. His gaze was like that of a wild beast. He quickly rushed towards Jean Zifu. Chao Ziqian was in the prime of his life. Jean Zifu was pushed to the ground. Chao Ziqian didn't say anything and pressed Jean Zifu's body. His hands grabbed Jean Zifu's neck and said, Way out? What way do I have to live? Fine, you know how much I've contributed to the factory over the years. But how can you treat me like this? You think I don't know? The money you borrowed from the bank was all in my name. You don't have the ability to repay it. Not only that, you're also addicted to gambling. Your family's property has long been lost by you. If it wasn't for my hard work over the years, the factory wouldn't have lasted until now. I will never let you take everything from me. You. Jean Zifu painfully struggled. His hand quietly moved towards his clothes. It was difficult to breathe. Perhaps he would die in the next second. He couldn't care too much. He didn't expect Chao Ziqian to suddenly lose his mind and counterattack. Jean Zifu suddenly regretted coming up alone. Found it. A pistol. Trembling, he slowly pulled it out. Very good. Chao Ziqian didn't notice it at all. Using all his strength, Jean Zifu struggled to aim the pistol at Chao Ziqian's waist. As long as he pulled the trigger, he would immediately be able to escape from death. But at this time, his hand suddenly became empty. The pistol had disappeared without a trace. Mr. Chao, if you pinch him to death like this, then you will really lose everything. Don't you want to celebrate your child's birthday? A slow voice suddenly sounded in the office. Chao Ziqian suddenly froze, as if he was drenched in cold water. His trembling hands let go of Jean Zifu's neck. Terrified, he crawled up and subconsciously looked towards the source of the voice. It's you guys! Not only Chao Ziqian screamed, but also Jean Zifu, who was coughing. Not only that, Jean Zifu looked like he saw a ghost. His eyes were full of panic. He saw Luoqiu and Yi, but he clearly remembered that Luoqiu and you should have been shot by him. Gun! That gun turned out to be snatched by that woman. Looking at the USP-45 in Ye's hand, Jean Zifu became more panicked and at a loss of what to do. Impossible. You too obviously already. Impossible. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Jean Zifu's body trembled as he continuously moved backwards on the ground. At this time, Luoqiu tried to make himself look calmly said, Mr. Jean, have you forgotten that the business between us has not been completed? I remember you said that you know about our existence from your grandfather, right? Didn't your grandfather tell you about our rules? You didn't fulfill your promise, So I'm sorry, we will take back the goods you need. Perhaps because he was too frightened, Jin Zifu trembled. Impossible! How could I keep those documents? I have destroyed them all in the first place. Luocho tidied up the scattered documents on Chao Ziqian's desk one by one, and then smiled. Are you talking about this pair of white papers? It doesn't matter how much Mr. Jean wants to destroy. It doesn't matter. Those documents that were full of details and even had signatures turned into pieces of white papers at this moment. Seeing this, Jin Zifu was more panicked and even had a feeling of madness. Even Chao Ziqian's face was full of surprise at this time. In fact, how did this young man and the woman beside him come in and the documents he had seen, but magically turned into pieces of white papers? You lied to me. Jin Zifu seemed to have figured something out and roared, From the beginning! You lied to me. You didn't keep your promise. Luocio said indifferently, I think the one who didn't keep his promise from the beginning should be Mr. Jean, right? From the moment you walked into the club and stated your purpose, you had already started to fabricate a lie, right? Looking at the silent Jin Zifu, Luocio said, slowly, no matter how emotional the words are, how sure the tone is, the eyes can't lie. When you told me that Chao Ziqian seized your factory and you wanted to seek justice for the workers, I did believe it, but I didn't feel any sincerity from your eyes. In addition, when people lie, they will unexpectedly make a lot of small movements that they can't detect. Because of this, you began to suspect me? Jin Zifu said inconceivably. Luocio said indifferently. At first, it was just a suspicion. That is, until I came here personally. We need to evaluate the value of this factory. Well, it's not important anymore. Luocio turned to look at Chao Ziqian. The important thing is I saw the general manager of your factory. With this, Luocio walked to Chao Ziqian's desk again. First, I saw this picture frame. Mr. Jean said that your daughter had an accident and died a few years ago. It's been a few years, but this picture is still here. Luocio turned the picture frame on the desk. In the picture, a woman was holding a newborn child, revealing a happy smile. Luocio said, Of course, this at most means that Mr. Chao is a relatively infatuated man, but it made me have a good impression. So I'm more interested in what kind of person is the so-called beast that Mr. Jean mentioned. Jin Zifu didn't say a word. Luocio said to himself, His desk is full of documents. When I came to see him in the afternoon, he was working hard. In addition, do you see that sofa? There are folded quilts and pillows, which means that Mr. Chao often rests in the office or even spends the night. Well, the secretary is a man. Don't take it the wrong way. Luocio looked around. It seemed that no one was interested in his joke, so he acted as if nothing had happened. I think, other than working here until late at night and forgetting the time, and finally spending the night here, there shouldn't be any other reason. Luocio looked at Jin Zifu expressionlessly again. I don't understand a man who loved his deceased wife deeply, worked overtime for the factory until late at night, and was clearly the general manager. But his office was so simple that there were no furnishings, and the leather chair he sat on was even cracked. Why did Mr. Jean say that he was a despicable man who plotted to steal your family's wealth? Jin Zifu was probably too frightened, or his ferocious nature after being exposed. That's right. I lied to you. But so what? How can I believe what you say? Besides, you don't have those documents at all, right? Luocio shook his head and was very patient. No, the documents Mr. Jean needs are indeed in my hands. He stretched out his hand, and with a flash of light a document bag appeared in his hand. I do intend to complete this transaction with Mr. Jean. It's just that Mr. Jean doesn't seem to trust me. Jin Zifu was stunned, looking at the documents flying out of the document bag and appearing in front of him, and then strangely flying back into the document bag again. He was so scared that he trembled again. He actually shot at this horrible guy. Until then, he remembered what his grandfather said when he gave him the black card. Never plan to cheat the club, or you will have to bear the price that you can't afford. Obviously, he had been shot and died, but now he appeared in front of him alive. Jin Zifu's legs suddenly softened, and he knelt on the ground in horror. I know I was wrong. Boss, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have lied to you. I will complete this transaction properly. 18 years and 6 months. Take it. Take it. No, Luocio said indifferently. Although this factory is in decline and even about to go bankrupt, it will still be a lot of property after liquidation. But you are born to like gambling, and you have big ambition but little talent. Even if you are given 18 years, you can't earn this much. So, if you want this factory, you need a total of 36 years and 10 months. Because you are the holder of the black card, I will give you a discount. 33 years, 1 month, and 15 days. This is the transaction fee you need to pay Mr. Jean. 33 years. 33 years. Jean, Zifu muttered to himself. Without 33 years, how long would he be able to live? Even if he got the factory back, he wouldn't be able to enjoy anything. This was obviously what he wanted. No, I don't want this transaction. I don't want it. I don't want it. As if he had gone mad, Jin Zifu rushed out of the door like a madman. However, at this time, in front of him, a black flame appeared out of nowhere, and he was so scared that he suddenly stopped his body. Amidst the burning black flames in the air, the black card that he threw at the club reappeared little by little. The 8th rule of Trafford's trading club: the transaction with the black card can't be cancelled. Along with Luocio's voice, the black flame instantly crashed into Jin Zifu's body. He let out a shriek and fell to the ground. As for the black card, it slowly flew into Luocio's hand, and the golden mark engraved on one side of the black card gradually disappeared. Luocio threw the file bag in his hand to Jin Zifu and said indifferently, "The transaction is completed." The office suddenly became so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Chao Ziqian's face was pale, and his breathing was rapid, because Luocio was looking at him at this moment. Yen, PS1. I originally planned to split this card into 2 chapters. Then I can update it twice. I'm too smart. Then I didn't know where to split it, so I didn't split it. Chapter 7. Genius 1, second remember love, /go, /little? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. The incredible scene in front of Chao Ziqian's eyes greatly impacted his cognition. But he had seen the wind and waves, and also cared about his child. He didn't want to end up like Jin Zifu, but what should he do? Don't be nervous, Luocio said slowly. My transaction partner is only your father-in-law. It has nothing to do with you. Chao Ziqian calmed down and looked at Jin Zifu, who was lying motionless on the ground. He didn't know what the transaction between the two was, but he knew that he encountered some things that were discussed at night. My dad, Jin Zifu, he died? Chao Ziqian asked nervously. Yu Yi answered for him. No, Mr. Jin just fell asleep. Fell asleep? Yu Yi nodded and smiled. Yes, he fell asleep. But this sleep lasted for 33 years, 1 month, and 15 days. After waking up, Mr. Jin could still enjoy the time under his body. How could it be? Chao Ziqian didn't want to believe these words. However, the inconceivable scenes that had just occurred told him that these were all true. After a moment of silence, Chao Ziqian suddenly looked at Luocio and said, I don't know you, but why did you help me? If Jin Zifu was in a coma for 33 years, then he couldn't open the file that was thrown in front of him. Even if Jin Zifu took back the file nominally, Chao Ziqian could still take it back easily. Not only did it wake him up in time, preventing him from making a huge mistake due to his impulsiveness, it also solved Jin Zifu's problem. From another point of view, Chao Ziqian obviously gained the most from it. Luocio looked at the motionless Jin Zifu on the ground and suddenly said, In the afternoon, I went to the developer who planned to cooperate with you to develop the factory. Although they planned to build a luxury residential area, they also planned to build 2 ordinary bungalows, which will be allocated to the old workers who have served in the factory for many years. Luo Qiu smiled and said, "Live a good life with your child in the future. The money from selling the land and liquidating the factory is enough for you to pay off your debt to the bank." Chao Ziqian suddenly felt a little sad. He stared at the mysterious young man in a daze, his throat choking up. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Luoqiu walked in front of Chao Ziqian and raised the black card in his hand. At this moment, both the front and back of the black card were floating at the same time with the mark that had already disappeared. Under Chao Ziqian's puzzled gaze, Luoqiu directly put the black card into Chao Ziqian's suit pocket. He said softly, "When you need something, you can find us through it." Luoqiu said softly, "With it, you are a member of the Trafford Buyers Club. No matter what you need, we can provide it for you. Dreams, wealth, wisdom, love, health, or lifespan. As long as you can provide enough transaction fees. Love, go, little, say, one last thing, we don't need money for the transaction fee. Then I look forward to your visit." With that, Luoqiu retreated and disappeared in front of Chao Ziqian little by little, wrapping Yu Yi and fading away little by little. "Wait a minute. What's your name?" Chao Ziqian subconsciously wanted to keep him for a moment. "How do you know that I want to celebrate my child's birthday?" But Luoqiu and Yu Yi had disappeared into thin air. Chao Ziqian felt powerless for a while and sat down directly, finding that his back was wet with sweat because of nervousness and fear. At this moment, there was a sudden change in front of Chao Ziqian, and Luoqiu appeared in front of him again. This gave him quite a fright. But Luoqiu didn't say anything, just turned the calendar table on the office table, smiled slightly, and then disappeared again. This time he really left. Chao Ziqian was absent-minded for a while, staring at the calendar table in a daze. There was a big red circle around a certain date, and then the word "gift" was written next to it. He couldn't help but cry bitterly. According to Yu Ye's method, Luoqiu walked in front of the altar on the 3rd floor of the club. He opened his hands in front of the altar, and a cloud of gray fog gradually formed between his hands, and then slowly floated into the altar. There was nothing special about it. As if it naturally dispersed, this cloud of gray fog disappeared in front of Luoqiu's eyes. But at this moment he heard a sound in his mind. "Sacrifice completed. Increase lifespan by 30 days. Maybe it wasn't a sound, but information that flowed into his mind. As for the hourglass that he specially brought, at this moment, the sand above seemed to have increased, and the speed of the falling sand also slowed down a little. He won't die of illness, won't be shot, and won't even age. If there was something that could hurt him, it was probably the moment when the sand in the hourglass completely fell. After waiting for a while, the altar still didn't change, so Luoqiu scratched his head, using 33 years of Jin Zifu's life to exchange for 30 days of my life. What a scam! Because it's life, not the original lifespan. Of course, the quality isn't that high, Yu Yi said. In addition, the previous club owners didn't use all of the transaction fee for the sacrifice, but kept a part of it. It will get better. Luoqiu took a deep breath and didn't intend to blame the servant girl for reminding him. Instead, he suddenly realized, no wonder there are so many strange things in here. Don't tell me that the previous owner kept them? Yu Yi nodded. Luoqiu didn't want to stay in front of this gloomy altar, so he led Yu Yi back to the shop. He suddenly stretched and said, Yu Yi, do you know how to make braised meatballs? It seems that I haven't eaten for half a day, so I'm hungry now. Yu Yi nodded and said, I learned this country's cuisine before, so I still remember the cooking method. Yu Yi, prepare it for the owner immediately. It'll be slower if you do it alone. Let me help. Luoqiu said with a smile, then I'll take care of you in the future. The dark, blue, beautiful, gem-like eyes seemed to flash, and Yu Yi nodded lightly. Late at night, the bustling commercial street had calmed down. Only those homeless people on the street, or those who lost their way after getting drunk, fell asleep, or staggered. But they did notice that on this dark street There was a very old European-style lamp, and there was a sign on the old wooden door with the word "Open." According to legend, only those who needed it could see its existence. Then, when you see the lamp in front of the door, do you need anything? Yen 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 yen. Chapter 8. Genius 1. Second, remember love divided by little? It provides you with wonderful novels to read. At home, even in his own room. Through a direct transmigration. He returned to this place directly from the club on Commercial Street. Looking at all the familiar objects in the room, he felt as if he had been away for a lifetime. The club had a place to rest. In fact, the 2 upper floors of the club were used for living. As the owner of the club, if he didn't plan to wait for death, he could always live a long life. The long river of time would make the owner of the club lose his home. The only thing left was the club. So the upper 2 floors of the club were very exquisite. However, those things were still very far away for Luocio. The expensive incense burning on the upper floor of the club made people feel relaxed and happy, but it couldn't compare with the bedding in this small room full of the smell of sunshine. Luocio turned on the old CD player in the room. The slowly flowing notes made him feel comfortable. He lay on the bed, trying to recall what happened in the past 2 days. He had completed the first transaction. The remaining 30 days of life became 60 days. It was not because of the extra 30 days that he could be relaxed about his situation. It was just because Luocio felt that if he couldn't be alone and calm down, it would be difficult for him to plan what he should do next. He was not a natural rational person, but because of the long period of solitude, the loneliness that always lingered in the bottom of his heart made him more accustomed to thinking. Under normal circumstances, there was a fundamental difference between doing something after thinking it through and doing it without thinking. Love, go, little, say, Kuhi slowly planned his own path. If nothing unexpected happened, his life would have no end in sight. He would not age, but after 10 or at most 20 years, this secret would not be kept. The club drifted around. This time, it came to the Commercial Street, probably because of this reason. There was no way to stay in one place for too long, and it was even more impossible to have any involvement. He couldn't have a family because he had to disappear from their eyes when he was the happiest. In addition to the pain of his family, he was afraid that he would also have his own sadness. Luocio suddenly understood why the previous owner of the club showed such ecstasy and couldn't wait to be liberated from this loneliness. The former boss might have watched his relatives, lovers, and even descendants die of old age one by one. Of course, this was just Luocio's baseless guess. Before he came back, he asked you what kind of person the former boss was. And from Ye's answer, he only knew that the former boss was a man of few words. The former boss would only appear when a customer appeared. Most of the time, he would stay in his room and listen to music from an ancient music box for the entire day. And Yi listened for 300 years. In this case, it was quite terrifying. Perhaps one day, Luocio would be like his former boss. Love, go, little, say, Ku, first of all, like a normal person, spend the next 10 years. Perhaps the future would be accompanied by loneliness for eternity. But for Luocio, at an age where he was still full of fantasies, he was more interested in the mysteries brought by the club and all kinds of incredible things. The CD player played an English song which accompanied him to sleep. The song was called Race. When he was about to fall asleep, Luocio felt that if what he yearned for was loneliness, then all this might be a strange grace for him. When he woke up at night, he probably woke up because he heard the movement from the kitchen at home. Luocio walked out of his room. The smell from the kitchen indicated that the cook was cooking his favorite dish. The woman was very simple, wearing a simple blue shirt and jeans. Her hair was tied up casually, and she was busy in the kitchen with an apron. Although she was very simple, she was also young and beautiful. In today's society, 29 years old was the most beautiful time for a woman. Maybe there were many successful men pursuing her, but obviously she spent all that time at home taking care of her children. Ran Xiling, who said it was out of interest, had been working as a reporter in a newspaper office after graduation. It seemed that she was now the deputy chief editor. The young reporter met Luo Chio's father in the process of reporting a murder case. Then, as if she was bewitched, she fell in love with Luo Chio's father, a widower who lost his wife in his early years. Maybe something happened in the process that could shake the middle-aged man and the young woman, and Luo Chio didn't know about it. Then, in the monotonous 2 rooms and 1 living room, the smell of this woman, called Ren Xiling, began to appear. It had been 3 years after that man passed away, but she was still there. Luo Chio, you're awake? I wanted to wake you up after cooking. Ren Xiling heard the movement behind her, grabbed the spatula used for cooking, and turned around. Ren Xiling's bangs were stuck to her forehead, probably because she was too angry. They looked like silk threads that had been sewn in the wrong place by a needlewoman. Seeing Luo Chio looking at her without a word, Ren Xiling subconsciously touched her face. Is my face dirty? Luo Chio shook his head, turned around, and planned to watch TV in the living room for a while. But he still reminded her. The ventilator is not on. Ah, not good. As if she had just woken up, Ren Xiling hurriedly turned on the ventilator. She was in a hurry, but she still emphasized calmly, "It'll be very quick. We'll be able to eat soon. Do you want to wash your hands first?" Of course. She didn't hear Luo Chio's response. Ren Xiling was also used to it and was busy heating the food on the pot. Luo Chio turned on the TV and began to watch the news. It was almost like this for the past few years. At 9 o'clock in the evening, it was dinner time. Ren Xiling seemed to be very proud to recommend her cooking to Luo Chio, and directly put the food into Luo Chio's bowl. Luo Chio suddenly said, "If you're busy with work recently, you don't have to come back to cook." The club was operating as usual. Perhaps Luo Chio's time was more unstable than the current deputy editor of the newspaper. Ren Xiling suddenly knocked on Luo Chio's bowl with chopsticks and said with a straight face, "Luo Chio, I don't think I asked you what's going on a trip, right? Then shouldn't you reserve my rights as a mother?" Well, Luo Chio could only lower his head and eat the braised meatballs in brown sauce in the bowl. Sure enough, it had been a few years, but she still couldn't cook well. Perhaps because she was too tired after eating and washing up, Ren Xiling directly went into the room and fell asleep without caring about the unwashed dishes. After Luo Chio washed the bowls and chopsticks, he planned to enjoy the wind on the balcony. But suddenly he heard Yu Ye's call, saying that there were new guests in the club. The so-called new guests referred to those who didn't find the club because of the certificate, but came in by themselves. They were new guests. Yen 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 yen. Chapter 9. A genius remembers love in 1 second. /small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. PS1. Thank you to my friends 1507261323464409, Dusk's Golden Turtle Bug, and 1601041115011033 for their tips. Also, can digital book friends change some of their nicknames? The numbers make me dizzy, and it's hard to distinguish them. PS2. Of course, I'm asking for your collection and recommendation. Yen 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 text below. Then it had been less than 3 days since he became the club's owner. But when he came to the club from his home, he felt as comfortable as if he was at home. Luo Chio couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Yu Yi was already waiting at the place where he appeared, holding a set of clothes with both hands. This was a rather particular doll maid. As the owner of the club, he should look like the owner of the club. In a situation where he couldn't ask for elegance or knowledge, he should at least dress appropriately, although he didn't feel that there was anything wrong with wearing casual clothes. Seeing that Yu Yi seemed to have a strong obsession in this aspect, Luo Chio followed suit. After all, black could cover up many problems and bring about a sense of mystery. Luo Chio was 1.76 meters tall. Together with the single-breasted black trench coat Yu Yi had prepared for him, the long square-collared linen, the same black shirt, and a long golden pendant. He looked a little more fitting for the club. Of course, Luocio, who didn't really care about his hairstyle, combed his hair back at Yu Ye's request. I feel like I've suddenly gained a few more years of life. As the saying goes, clothes make the man. He straightened his clothes in front of the mirror and prepared to go downstairs to meet the guest. He also listened to Yu Ye's explanation of the new guest. When Yu Ye said that the new guest should be a newly formed monster, Luocio almost lost his footing and rolled down the stairs. Yes, he held onto the handrail of the stairs, and when he finally walked down, he gained some strength. He remembered that as long as the owner of the club didn't die, there was nothing to be afraid of, even if it was a monster. Then he began to be interested in monsters. Monsters, were they like the images in movies? They were always more mysterious than him, the club's boss. They were definitely beautiful. Most of the time, reality was very realistic. After confirming that the object in front of him could indeed move, Luocio more or less had a new understanding of the monster in his heart. His back was hunched, and he was wearing tattered black clothes. He also wore an old gray hat that covered both sides of his face. It was probably a disposable mask that he had bought from a pharmacy on the street. The other thing he wore was a pair of sunglasses that covered his eyes. Even his hands were covered in white stockings, which were commonly seen on construction sites. There were even scarves. Basically, not even a bit of skin was exposed. Although the appearance was strange, it was not beyond Luocio's psychological tolerance. "Hello, I'm the boss here. How can I help you?" However, he had to be polite to the guest. This was clearly written in the club owner handbook. Luocio could only smile and break the silence first. "I heard that everything can be bought here. I didn't expect that it really exists." His words were intermittent and unclear. Moreover, his voice was hoarse, as if his vocal cords were burned. However, Luocio still understood the meaning of the guest's words clearly. He should have heard the legend of the club from somewhere and had the idea to look for it. Then he actually found this place, so it was magical and so on. "How should I address you, sir?" Luocio still said with a smile. At this moment, Yu Yi served 2 cups of flower tea, but the guest didn't seem to have any intention of drinking. Luocio felt a bit of pity. He probably didn't have the chance to see what the guest looked like. "Name, no." The weird guy shook his head. "Whatever you." Luocio subconsciously looked at Yu Yi beside him, but found that the servant girl slightly clenched her hands and looked straight ahead, waiting for orders. Unlike the first time when Yu Yi met Jin Zifu, she didn't take the initiative to do something. Luocio thought that the servant girl probably didn't want to cross the line after telling him some things that the club owner needed to know. "Let's talk about the guest's request." Luocio pulled out the chair opposite the guest and sat down. Because he was a new boss, there were many things that he didn't understand, so he simply said directly, "What do you want, and what is the transaction fee?" "Tomorrow at night is my important time. Enemy 1, protection me 1 at night is enough." It was still the same intermittent answer. The Trafford Club claimed to be able to buy anything, so protection time was naturally included. Luocio thought for a while and said, "Guest, you can stay here until you feel that it's okay to leave. We have extra rooms for you." "No, must in the wild." Luocio frowned. "Guest, you said that another enemy is chasing you, and you only need protection time tomorrow night, right?" "Yes." "Please tell me more about your enemy," Luocio said calmly. "Since you know this place, you should know some of the rules." "Mantis 100, 20 years. I can't deal with it." Luocio looked at Yu Yi again. At this time, Yu Yi came closer and whispered in his ear, "A 120-year-old monster is considered a small monster in the East. It's not strong, and it's not a problem to deal with or kill it." "Does that mean Yu Yi can deal with a 120-year-old mantis monster?" Basically, it also followed the principle of equal value transaction. The higher the value of the upper goods required, the higher the transaction fee needed to be paid. He heard that there was a circle of monsters in the world. But Luaccio, who didn't know much about the circle of monsters, didn't know how to get more information from this new guest. Maybe it would be better to ask you later. Besides, if the small monster in you, yes, words couldn't deal with it. As a monster, this new guest was probably a poor in the circle of monsters, right? What about the transaction fee? Luaccio had to ask, but at the same time he also induced, Guest, you have to know that we are dealing with an enemy you don't expect to deal with. What you need is protection. That is, if you lose this protection, you are likely to lose your life. So this protection is also buying your life at the same time. This. She saw the man carefully take out a package from his large black coat, something that was wrapped in a ball of newspaper. After opening it, it was a piece of white jade that was 1 finger long, 3 fingers wide, and 1 finger thick. It was narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. The other party should attach great importance to this jade. He put it on the table and pushed it to Luaccio little by little. Luaccio stretched out his palm and pressed on the jade. After completing the first transaction in his life, it wasn't just a longer lifespan. For example, Luaccio got a kind of appraisal ability. Of course, it seemed that the appraisal ability would strengthen with the number of transactions, and now he could only firmly get jade with unknown ability. Further appraisal needs to pay 20 days of lifespan. Sacrifice can get 70 days of lifespan. Well, that's it. The so-called ability wasn't strong, but it could be further appraised for a fee. Chapter 10. Genius 1. Second, remember love, go, / little. Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. No problem. Just when the buyer was uneasy, Luaccio nodded slightly. 1 night of safety, we can sell it to you. But I have another thing. Before Luaccio finished his words, the new customer said excitedly, No, you can't do that. You sit on the ground and raise the price. Luaccio smiled. Don't get me wrong. It's just my personal interest. If possible, I just want you to let me see your appearance. Of course, if you don't want to, I won't force you. I didn't make it clear whether you show it to me or not. It won't affect the deal between us. Really? Luaccio nodded. The new customer seemed to consider for a long time, then nodded with a hoarse voice. Yes, but only you can see and not tell anyone else. Luaccio was absolutely safe in the club, which was clearly written in the club owner's manual. After all, it was the first time in his life to see what a legendary monster looked like. The strong curiosity made Luaccio agree easily. He let ye go back to the inner hall to wait, and then waited expectantly for the new customer to start to uncover his clothes. The new customer seemed to be hesitant. I'm scared of you. Luaccio shook his head to ease the atmosphere. Don't look at me like this. I actually like to watch horror movies. Those should be the limit of horror and ugliness that can be imagined by humans. But if you really don't want to, I won't force you. Maybe we can talk about where you will stay tomorrow night. Well, where is the so-called wild that you have to stay in? I understand. The new customer stood up slowly. First began to untie the scarf around his neck, 1 round after another. When the scarf was completely removed, Luaccio saw a layer of dark green, full of wrinkles, covered with sparse and dry hair. But this neck alone gave people a kind of disgusting feeling. But it was still within an acceptable range. Luaccio took a deep breath and stared at the man's face even more intently. He took off his hat, his sunglasses, and his mask. Finally, he even took off his black coat. Every time he unlocked something, Luaccio's eyes would flicker, and his breathing would become slightly faster. He finally understood why he had to pay the price for his curiosity. But thinking that it was still his choice, he forced himself not to take it to heart. Even though the new customer in front of him gave him a visual impact that couldn't be compared to those movies. It has a body similar to xenomorphs, but its skin is as dark green as its neck, and it is also full of wrinkles. However, that was not all. There were many cracks on the other party's skin, which seemed to be wounds. Pieces of green skin had not been completely peeled off, and some green liquid was still flowing out of the wounds. They were insect claws that supported the sleeves of the white shirt. As for the head above the neck, it could be said to be completely insect. It was just the head of a very large insect. Its round mouth was filled with needle-like teeth. It probably didn't have an organ like a nose. Then, there were two huge black eyeballs without eyelids hanging above the mouth, one on the left and one on the right. Luocho didn't see anything like an ear, and there was even no hair. Of course, even the head had a situation where the skin was like rotting and cracked. When Luocho came back to his senses, the new customer had put on his clothes again and said, "I didn't scare you." Luocho took a deep breath and calmed down. "I feel okay." "No lie, I know it's ugly." Luocho shook his head, "but it is also a kind of life form. I think since it made you look like this, it probably has its own purpose. We humans have different aesthetic standards, maybe for your kind. You are a kind of beauty." The new customer said faintly, "Originally, it wasn't like this, at least it wasn't ugly. Human, pollution, food, bad, growing like this." Was it because he ate contaminated food that caused his body to fester? Luocho calmed down. This monster looked like an insect that had become a spirit. There was no saying that spirits were not allowed after the founding of the country, because a living insect monster was standing in front of him. What was the food of insects, usually? The first thing that came to Luocho's mind was probably the roots and leaves of plants. He had indeed heard that because of industrial pollution in the past few years, acid rain had fallen in many places, causing a lot of vegetation to be damaged. There were also some factories that carelessly discharged sewage containing chemicals or metal waste, causing the water source to mutate and cause diseases. But he didn't expect that the pollution of nature by humans was so strong that even monsters couldn't withstand it. Luocho put the jade plate back into the newspaper pile and pushed it in front of the new customer. "Keep this jade plate first. Our rule is that we only collect the transaction fee after the goods are delivered. In addition, until tomorrow night, you can also live here. Of course, if you don't like it, you can come back tomorrow night." The new customer was stunned. "I can stay." "Of course, there are actually quite a lot of empty houses here." Luocho smiled. "And if you don't mind, I also want to have a monster to talk to me." "Well, talk about monsters." The new customer was silent for a moment and said, "You don't dislike it?" Luocho shook his head. "As I said, the visual impact doesn't mean anything. In the eyes of humans, you may be ugly, but in the eyes of your kind, you may be the most normal or even beautiful. I just want to know more about the different life forms." Luocho smacked his lips and said, "Of course, I don't dislike it, because I'm more interested in it." The insect monster seemed to be hesitating or considering, but Luocho didn't hear the answer he wanted in the end. Because the insect monster rejected his kindness, it hurriedly left the club, only leaving the specific time and place for tomorrow night. After the insect monster left, Yu came out from the inner hall. But at the same time, Yu also came out with a black pistol on a tray. If Luocho wasn't wrong, it should be the one she took from Jean Zifu. Luocho looked at the servant girl's action with astonishment. He reached for the pistol in his hand. "If you need to protect the guest tomorrow night, Yu may not be able to take care of Master's safety. But it's impossible for others to hurt Master." Yu said softly, "What I want to say is if Master feels bored, you can play with this pistol." Luocho was stupefied for a moment and then laughed. "Monsters, are they afraid of bullets?" Yu said indifferently, "In fact, many monsters are afraid of weapons made by humans." Monsters were also a type of life form. Even though monsters had more abilities than humans and were much stronger, they were still made of flesh and blood. Most of them can't resist the highly destructive weapons made by humans. Otherwise, why are there so many different kinds of monsters in the world? Why don't humans know about them? And why don't monsters use their bodies to move around in society? Luocho weighed the UPS in his hand and suddenly said, "It's because compared to humans being afraid of monsters, monsters are actually more afraid of humans." "Master, do you know how to use a gun?" Yu chuckled and changed the topic. Yi can teach some simple skills. Luocio shook his head, but his body suddenly turned and faced the wall on the side of the club. At the same time, Luocio's feet were slightly wider than his shoulders. His knees were slightly bent and his toes were slightly closed. At the same time, his two arms naturally extended. His right hand held the gun while his left hand held the gun with his palm facing inwards and the trigger guard. Finally, he made a gesture of aiming at a vase on the wall. When father was still alive, he taught me how to use a gun. Luocio said with nostalgia. Yen PS1. Let me ask you, are you afraid? Are you afraid? Raise your hands and vote. Otherwise, I'll use the Nutrition Express in my left hand and the Nutrition Express in my right hand. Unlimited bullets, are you afraid? Chapter 11. Genius 1. Second, remember love, /go, /little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. But Luocio didn't know where Yi got the extra bullets. Although he had played with guns before, it was only in places permitted by the government and with the accompaniment of a commissioner. Luocio's father had passed away for a few years, and he hadn't touched this kind of thing for a few years. Although it wasn't to the extent of forgetting it, what was left was probably just an empty shelf. He still needed to practice aiming. The club gave him the ability to freely travel, which was very useful. In the second half of the night, Luocio, accompanied by Yi played this kind of shooting game that he had once been addicted to in the wilderness. Bang, 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 bang. Only the small animals in the wilderness were alarmed, but more than a dozen magazines had been unknowingly used. A refreshing feeling arose spontaneously. Luocio rubbed his sore shoulders, looked at the specific result of the last shooting, smiled and said, "Is it okay?" Yi also smiled and said, "Master, as long as you're happy." Luocio certainly knew that the result was actually a bit terrible, but he wasn't embarrassed. He just handed the pistol to Yi and then waved his hand. The left was the door to the club and the right was his way home. "If there's a guest, just call me." Luocio tried to explain some of the situation. "If possible, I'm still me, an ordinary college student living in the city, with a very good stepmother at home." Yi nodded and watched Luocio disappear on the right. Yi didn't stop after returning to the club. She just sat quietly without closing her eyes, but the sapphire blue eyes gradually dimmed. For Yi, this was already a rest. But when the wooden door was opened and the bell rang, the maid who had served here for 300 years would stand up with a beautiful smile on her face. When he woke up in the morning, Ren Xiling had already gone to work. According to normal circumstances, Luocio should also be taking the bus to the university where he was studying. However, he didn't plan to return to school yet. Luocio didn't have many friends in the university. In fact, most of the students who entered the university didn't have many real friends. There were many people in the same class, but they only knew each other. Not everyone was passionate about socializing and taking pride in having a wide circle of friends. Because you have a wide circle of friends, in fact, not many people are willing to pour their hearts out for you. Of course, he didn't have many friends and didn't have much to worry about in school. The main reason was Luocio's major. Even today, Luocio still had the feeling that he must have been bewitched to choose this profession. It seemed to be a newly opened major in recent years. Even if the current fourth-year students were included, there were no graduates yet. Luocio's current class, including himself, only had 2 people majoring in paleontology. Although he knew that the reason why he chose this major was more or less because he hadn't gotten over the grief of his father's death and didn't want to stay in a crowded place. There was even a sense of self-abandonment. But now Luocio still thought that he must have been bewitched. However, paleontology also had its benefits. For example, the courses were quite loose, to the extent that it made liberal arts students feel uncomfortable. For example, there was only one old professor in the class, and the old professor skipped class more than Luocio as a student, therefore, even if he suddenly skipped class for a week, he wouldn't fail because of the low attendance rate on his report card at the end of the semester. There was only one course, and there were no general courses. Some people said that the reason why this major was established must be because the old professor had some secret deal with the university. It was said that the old professor was very obsessed with paleontology research. So, in the name of opening a new major, he embezzled funds to support direct research. Therefore, he didn't even need to ask the only student in the class to help him apply for leave. After washing up, Luocho poured a cup of warm water and sat in front of the computer. He began to use the satellite map to check the places where he needed to guard the insect demon at night. Although he could directly use his teleportation ability to take a look, in fact, the things that could be seen with the naked eye would never be as macroscopic as the satellite map. Luocho spent the whole morning looking for the source of the poison. The insect monster said that its body became rotten because it ate food with harmful substances, so Luocho spent most of his time looking for the possible source of the poison on the map. It wasn't until noon that Luocho turned off the computer and returned to the club. Since last night, no new guests had appeared. The lunch that Yu prepared for Luocho was stewed beef with a small plate of pickled cucumber, bread, caviar, and finally the red cabbage soup that he had already eaten once. Luocho carefully looked at the bread. This should be de lieba, right? Yes, it's called by a homonym here. Yu smiled. Of course, it's actually just ordinary bread, but it's a bit bigger and harder. Luocho looked at the neatly arranged and even artistic dishes in front of him, smiling. These should be common Russian dishes, especially the red cabbage soup. This is the second time it's been made. It seems that Yu likes Russian dishes very much. Yu just smiled, not answering Luocho's question directly. But it should be possible to infer something. For example, Yu was a puppet with a sealed soul made by an alchemist. Since it was called an alchemist, it naturally wouldn't be an Oriental person from the country where Luocho was located. So the alchemist was likely to be a Russian or someone from a nearby country. And that cold country could also be Yuye's, the hometown of the soul in Yuye's body. However, Luocho once asked Yu if she remembered what happened before she became a puppet. She just shook her head, and her sapphire blue eyes looked a little dim at that time. Master, do you not like this type of dish? Yu suddenly asked. The puppet didn't need to eat, but Yu could cook delicious dishes. This might be the only thing that was related to the memory of the soul sealed in the puppet. In the past 300 years, Yu probably cooked these Russian dishes the most, right? It doesn't matter, I'm not picky. Luocho shook his head. But if you eat it like this, it might not be the original taste. He looked at Yu and smiled. So, if there's a chance, let's go to Russia and use the freshest ingredients there to cook. I think the taste will be very good. Not knowing if it was an illusion, Luocho felt that he saw a trace of expectation in this pair of beautiful sapphires. After lunch, Luocho stayed in the club and chatted with Yu. From her, he began to explore the world of monsters hidden in the human society. Until the appointed time with the insect monster, Luocho didn't know. He was completely immersed in Yu's strange stories. Until Yu reminded him of the time, Luocho hurriedly opened the teleportation portal to the appointed place. The next moment, a person and a puppet appeared on the ground under the new moon. They were surrounded by forests, and there was a river flowing from the west. Not far away, they could vaguely see the shadows of buildings, and there was a faint light coming from them. It was a chemical factory that had landed here. In the early years, there seemed to be news of sewage being discharged privately. After it was exposed, it stopped and rectified. It seemed that it had reopened. The river in front of them reflected the new moon. But a few years ago, it might have been murky, and there were even floating fish carcasses. How long would the river be clear? Master, the guest is here. Yu suddenly reminded Luocho, pulling his eyes and thoughts out of the river. Luocho took a deep breath and turned around with a smile to welcome his second guest. The speed of its movement was not fast, maybe because it was an insect, but its attire was the same as last night. The insect monster slowly moved to the front of Luocho, with a trace of joy. You really came. Luocho looked at the night sky. The surrounding environment was not bad, quiet and cool. If he had a book to read, perhaps it would not be too boring to spend the night. But the reality did not seem to be so simple. At this moment, a sharp cry sounded from far and near. Looking at the insect monster suddenly began to tremble. Luaccio knew that the enemy mentioned by the insect monster had come. A 120-year mantis monster? Chapter 12. Genius 1. Second, remember love divided by go divided by little? Say net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. PS1. Looking for favorites and recommendations. Love, go, little, say. The following text, talking with the insect demon, was different. There was a high chance that they would have to fight, and it was a fight with a monster. Luaccio couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He was nervous, but not afraid. His life and soul belonged to the club, and there was basically nothing in the world that could take it away. However, as the club's owner, Luaccio hadn't lived for thousands of years. Most of his human emotions still occupied the majority, so he was nervous. As for not being afraid, since he couldn't die, what was there to be afraid of? Luaccio and his father, who had a strong sense of justice, weren't the same kind of people. However, Luaccio had always remembered what Lao Luo said when he entered the game. Lao Luo said, "Don't be a coward, fight head-on." Holding Yuye's USP in his hand, Luaccio loaded the gun immediately, holding it with both hands at the same time, the muzzle pointing diagonally to the ground. Yu Yi was obviously much more relaxed. Perhaps Yu Yi didn't care about the mantis monster that would appear. She was just standing there, no different from how she usually was. The insect demon, however, looked a little worse. The black coat wrapped around it constantly swayed slightly because of the trembling. Seeing this, Luaccio moved a little closer, blocking the insect demon's front. At this time, Luaccio and the other two just happened to have their backs against the river. In front and on the left and right were the forest. If the mantis monster was going to come, it would obviously be more troublesome to go through the river. Suddenly, a sharper whistling sound rang out. At the same time, a black shadow suddenly jumped out of the forest on the left as the clouds drifted through the moonlight. Before Luaccio could react, Yu Yi had already stepped out in the night. Suddenly, two clanging sounds were heard in the air. When the crescent moon reappeared from the clouds, Luaccio saw that Yu Yi now had a black metal rod in her hand. Under the moonlight, a fourth figure also appeared. Yep, a demon shadow. Who are you? A gloomy voice came from the front. Luaccio began to focus and found that his vision had become much clearer. The mantis monster stood with its legs slightly spread apart, but its hands were hanging straight down. The fingers on its palms were completely pressed against each other. Yes, fingers, because what Luaccio saw was clearly a young man with a slightly pale face, complete facial features, and even distinct features. Unexpectedly, in the eyes of ordinary people, he was a rather handsome young man. He was wearing a casual dark blue striped suit jacket and pants of the same color. If it wasn't for her strange posture, she would have looked like a very competent fashion model. Only the gloomy look on her face destroyed her good looks that could have left a good impression. Well, this mantis monster style was obviously different from that of the insect monster. Luaccio even felt that this was more in line with the style that he imagined when a monster appeared. Well, Mr. Mantis, if possible, I hope you can leave. Luaccio deliberated over his wording. This friend is currently under our protection. If possible, can you please leave tonight? It was stupid to fight without a word. When you could solve the problem without using your fists, you wouldn't use your fists. This was more in line with the concept of modern society. It was not that you didn't want to earn transaction fees easily without putting in effort, but the club also had some clear rules. That was, the existence of the club couldn't be casually disclosed to the public, especially when there was a hostile relationship. The club's name shouldn't be used. Yu Yi said that there were many existences in Trafford that were known or heard rumors, but most of them were unknown. It was unnecessary to let those who didn't know too much. About the club, the water behind it was very deep. Luocio knew that he probably couldn't really figure it out in a short time. Its existence was much longer than Ye's service time. The things that the servant girl knew were probably the things that she had learned from her previous boss over the past few hundred years. The former boss might occasionally mention some of her knowledge, but considering that the former boss was a middle-aged nerd who could stay in her room and listen to music box all day long, Luocio guessed that many of Ye's knowledge had been added with a lot of people's second creation. Just as Luocio was absent-minded as usual, the mantis monster moved. "Ai, go, shao, say, kahumph." The mantis monster showed a scornful smile. His eyes passed over Luocio and looked directly at the insect monster at the back. "I was wondering why you still had the guts to show up. It turns out that you found 2 helpers. But, little guy, do you think you can escape from my hands like this?" The mantis monster suddenly took a step forward, and the ferocious look on his face became thicker. The insect monster instinctively took a step back in fear and said in horror, "You don't come here!" The mantis monster laughed. "You are a bastard who hasn't even reached 50 years old. Do you think I really care about you? If it weren't for the fact that I've eaten all the slightly bigger monsters in the mountains these past few years, causing me to be unable to eat even a single meal, do you think I'd be willing to eat a kid like you who's still wet behind the ears?" The mantis monster snorted again. "I was the one who ate your mother. I can still remember her screams, even now. Do you remember? Ha 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 ha. Back then, in order to protect you, your mother walked to her death. Do you think I don't know that you are hidden under the soil? Don't joke around. I'm not in the mood for a baby like you. I let you go because I want you to grow up so that I can fill my stomach. Ah, now that I think of your mother's screams when she died, I am very excited. How do you think I should eat you? Just like when I ate your mother? First, I broke your arm, and then I twisted your head off. You remember, right? When your mother died, her head was twisted off. No, say it. Ah." With a shrill cry, the insect monster seemed to have completely lost its mind. It directly passed by Luocio and went toward the mantis monster. Unexpectedly, probably because this body was really too clumsy, Luo-Chi couldn't help but stretch out his leg in front of it, and directly knocked the insect monster to the ground. It seems that Mr. Mantis's ability to attract hatred is really first class. As an observer, I feel that it was a wrong decision not to directly attack at the beginning. Luocio shook his head. "Stand up. You are now under our protection. If you are under our protection and the guest wants to fight directly, we will lose face." Probably because of this fall, the insect monster also woke up. What was the mantis's intention? It was immediately shocked and frightened. "Busybody, I will eat you first." The mantis sneered and suddenly jumped high. In midair, the mantis monster's pair of white palms suddenly began to elongate, and the clothes on its arms burst at the same time. Its arms turned into sharp bores and directly wanted to cut down from above. Although he had no experience in fighting monsters, looking at the mantis monster falling at high speed in midair, Luocio couldn't help but quickly pick up the USP in his hand. Bang, bang, bang! This was a very good target. If he didn't shoot a few times, it would really be a waste of the bullets he had wasted to practice. "You want to hurt me with this kind of human toy? Naive." The 2 arm bores directly blocked in front of him, and the .45 caliber bullets couldn't penetrate the bores. The mantis monster landed in front of Luocio, and the arm bores directly swept out. The bores were so sharp that even rocks could be easily cut open. Seeing this, Luocio quickly squatted down and dodged. Of course, it didn't matter if he didn't dodge. He wouldn't die even if his head was hit by a bullet, and his body would probably heal automatically if cut in half. It didn't matter if he had an immortal body, he could be more confident. The problem was that it would hurt. At that time, Jin Zifu shot Luocio's head. Although he was alive and kicking now, he was in so much pain that he almost wanted to cry out. Luocio didn't intend to become a masochist, and at the same time he didn't want to randomly increase his skills by hundreds of years by taking a beating. In fact, he wanted to let his opponent beat him up before he was willing to fight back. Naturally, Luocio didn't want to let himself suffer pain. Also, what was the mentality of those people who created messy martial arts that required their opponents to be beaten up until their heads bled in order to increase their skills? Luocio, who was habitually absent-minded, squatted down, and the mantis monster had already ruthlessly kicked out. But this kick, which should have directly hit him, kicked the air instead. Luocio was like a ghost, appearing 3 meters away from the mantis monster. Yes, he was still in a squatting position, probably feeling that this kind of style was somewhat different from him as the mysterious club owner. Luocio quickly stood up. Sorry, although it was very satisfying to continuously shoot more than a dozen magazines last night, Luocio himself was even more satisfied to play with this teleportation ability after returning home. If it wasn't for the fact that he played until the middle of the night and was dispirited, he wouldn't have been unaware that his stepmother, Rinzailing, had left the house in the morning. He wasn't like this usually. At this moment, the mantis monster was obviously startled, but its nature was savage and had been fighting and killing for hundreds of years. It wasn't easy for it to be affected by strange things. It didn't matter that this kick didn't hit, the target was not far away. Just as the mantis monster was about to cut Luocio open with the boring knife again, it suddenly felt as if its head had exploded. The roaring sound was so loud that it felt as if its soul was torn apart. Before it could think of anything else, its body directly fell to the ground, its limbs twitching and foaming. Then its body slowly began to show strange changes. That was, its original appearance was revealed. What a big mantis! Luocio couldn't help but give Yu Yi a thumbs up. The black metal rod that could retract was obviously a very good hit. Of course, to be able to directly take such a vicious blow without alerting the mantis monster at close range required a very high level of skill in itself. Non-professionals should not easily attempt such a thing. The insect monster didn't expect that its old enemy would be so easily knocked to the brink of death by a stick, directly revealing its original appearance. At this moment, it suddenly let out a shrill cry and quickly crawled toward the mantis monster's body. Looking at its posture, it was much faster than walking upright. Yu Yi seemed to be a little disgusted, and when the insect monster approached, she had already retreated a few steps. At this time, the insect monster directly bit toward the mantis monster. Damn, this insect monster is not to be trifled with. Yen 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 yen. Chapter 13. A Genius Remembers Love in 1 Second? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Luocio had the habit of playing on forums and tieba. This was probably a common phenomenon among young people in society. No matter how boring the topic was, it would always attract netizens' responses. For example, Luocio posted a post on a tieba that he frequented. How can I watch a big bug swallow a big praying mantis? Urgent, waiting online. But this question was probably so boring that even the netizens didn't want to answer it. After Luocio glanced at the other posts, the insect demon finally got his revenge and swallowed his enemy alive. The strange scene in front of him was not much worse than the bloody scenes in the zombie movies that Luocio had seen before. Fortunately, it was a long time after dinner. Luo Qi took a deep breath and broke the silence. Do you want to drink some water? The river over there is clear. It was not to be expected that a fellow who longed for solitude, liked to observe people at a distance, and was easily embarrassed in conversation, could say anything perceptive and comforting at this moment. Luocio felt that, in such an awkward situation, it was already very precious for him to say something like drinking water to moisten his throat. The insect demon was stunned for a moment. Looking down at his masterpiece, he was so scared that he jumped away and quickly crawled to the riverside. He lowered his head and began to vomit. After a long time, the insect demon drank 2 mouthfuls of water and slowly walked in front of Luocio and Yu Yi. It seemed to have calmed down a lot. Thank you for helping me take revenge. Luaccio nodded and said, "You don't have to be so polite. After all, this is a transaction. Now that the enemy you're so afraid of is dead, what's next?" They said that they wanted to buy a night of protection. If the night was not over, the goods delivered would not be considered complete. Logically speaking, Luaccio was in no position to take the insect demon's jade card. But if the buyer said that it was enough, then it was a different story. So Luaccio planned to do this. "But you said you were only afraid of this mantis monster. Now that it's dead, you should have nothing to be afraid of, right? This is the middle of nowhere, and it doesn't seem like a place that anyone would be willing to come to. Protect me before sunrise." After getting a definite answer from Luaccio, the insect demon seemed to be relieved. "Thank you." It spoke the smoothest sentence it had ever spoken. Next, the insect demon began to take off its black coat, revealing its extremely ugly body. The wounds on its body were much more severe than what Luaccio had seen yesterday. Silently turning around, the insect demon walked towards the riverbank step by step. His steps were slow but steady. Luaccio didn't know what the insect demon was going to do next, but he had a feeling that he was going to see something unforgettable. The new moon hung high in the sky. The insect demon had walked to the shallow part of the river, and its body entered the cold river water. It raised its head, facing the new moon hanging high in the sky. Its ugly body began to stretch as much as possible, and then slowly contracted. Luaccio still didn't know what the insect demon was going to do, but the feeling became different. The insect demon's completely curled body showed signs of hardening. Or maybe it was drying up. Luaccio wasn't sure, and he subconsciously approached. The riverbank in midsummer was now flickering with dark blue light spots, as if it was decorated by countless fireflies. The blue light was now reflected around the riverbank. The stone eggs washed up by the river were now like dark blue gems, so beautiful that it was too much for the eyes to take in. And the insect demon's body was now gathering a light yellow brilliance. Gradually, they seemed to have solidified, as if they were flowing golden water. It's absorbing the essence of the water and the moonlight. Yu Ye's voice suddenly sounded in Luaccio's ears. "Master, it's preparing to break out of its cocoon and step into a new stage of life." "Yes." Luaccio just nodded. Looking at the insect demon's current appearance, Luaccio had a rough guess. Yu Yi gave an answer to this guess. The insect demon really wanted to break out of its cocoon at night, so it needed protection. The essence of the water, the moonlight, and the joy of stepping into a new life. The surrounding forest was still, and the river wind was light, as if it was happy for this. After an unknown amount of time, Luaccio was still intoxicated by this magnificent light of life. Until the new moon retreated and the brilliance faded, he heard a dull sound. The cocoon broke. "Why does it seem like it can't come out?" Luaccio suddenly frowned. Monsters came from animals and insects, so they couldn't be separated from the nature of animals and insects. Basically, it could be confirmed that the insect demon was a kind of butterfly or moth. Under normal circumstances, it was a difficult process for butterflies to break out of their cocoons. However, because of their nature, they would eventually overcome the difficulties and break out of their cocoons. But Luaccio said that it couldn't come out, and it really couldn't come out. The insect demon's wings that were hidden in its cocoon couldn't extend out of the opening of its cocoon at this time. "It's too weak." Yu Yi shook her head and said, "Even if it absorbed the essence of the water and the moonlight, it's not enough. It's a pity that it's not a full moon tonight. Otherwise, it should be stronger." "Weak?" Luaccio sighed as he looked at the wings that were struggling to get out of the cocoon. However, the opening of the cocoon was too small, so it couldn't get out. It was because it ate food with harmful substances that caused its body to be weak. Luaccio suddenly took a deep breath and directly walked to the front of the giant cocoon. At the same time, he inserted both of his hands into the cocoon and forced the opening of the cocoon wider. "Listen, I can only help you to this point so that your wings can come out. But you have to struggle out of the cocoon by yourself." If you can't even overcome the difficulty of coming to this world, why did you come to this world? A pair of wings began to emerge from the cracked cocoon. The wings were not strong, and it seemed that it still needed time to fill up the flesh and blood inside, until it began to open to the wind. Emerald green and pink purple alternated, forming four symmetrical pieces and faintly flapping. Luo Qiu heaved a sigh and stepped back slowly. The insect demon had successfully spread its wings, and the next step was to wait for its body to complete the life change in the cocoon. Luoqiu sat down on a round rock by the river, and Yi silently accompanied him. Found it. Suddenly, Luoqiu happily waved his phone. There is indeed a trace to follow. Yi looked at the screen, which displayed a butterfly that was almost identical to the insect demon's wings. She softly read the butterfly's name. Gold? What butterfly? Gold ribbon beak butterfly. Luoqiu smiled and said, even if it's just an ordinary gold ribbon beak butterfly, it's already at the level of protection. Moreover, this is a gold ribbon beak butterfly that has become a demon, so it's even more difficult. It's so beautiful. You couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Luoqiu stood up, walked forward, and said with a smile, this is probably a rare life praise. It's better to take a closer look. Luoqiu, who walked to the front of the cocoon, began to look forward to it. After the mantis demon revealed its body, it was incomparably huge. The insect demon was as tall as an adult. What would happen after it broke out of the cocoon? An unprecedented gold ribbon beak butterfly that was as huge as a human might be a major discovery in the history of mankind. Finally, the crack of the cocoon suddenly broke open, and light slowly spread out from the cocoon. Then a pair of white, soft, boneless hands gently opened the sides of the cocoon. Luoqiu opened his mouth and looked at the winged insect demon. Well, now it was a butterfly demon. He realized that the thing that broke out of the cocoon wasn't a huge butterfly like he had imagined, but a woman with butterfly wings. Why was the style different again? Chapter 14. Genius 1. Second, remember love divided by little? I will provide you with wonderful novels to read. Although it was different from the huge butterfly he expected, it was still acceptable that the one who broke out of the cocoon was a woman flapping her butterfly wings. Love go little, say W. Chew, of course, the butterfly monster did not completely come out of the cocoon. The golden powder-like flowing mist was circling around the cocoon, blocking the beautiful things of this beautiful world for the first time. Seeing that the butterfly monster was about to come out of the cocoon, Luoqiu thought about it and took off his windbreaker. He threw it at the butterfly monster and said calmly, it's best if nothing unpleasant or embarrassing happens. The windbreaker fell into the butterfly monster's hands. The butterfly monster just smiled and said slowly, you humans are really strange. Luoqiu touched his nose and smiled, but did not continue the topic. Because the butterfly monster had butterfly wings on its back, it naturally could not wear the windbreaker. It draped it in front of its body and grabbed it with both hands. The butterfly monster suddenly opened its wings and flew out of the cocoon. Bathed in the gray haze, it was beautiful. Finally, it slowly landed in front of Luoqiu and said gratefully, thank you. If not for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to come out. It was a very beautiful smile, and its sparkling skin made it even more flawless. Thinking of the ugliness before it broke out of the cocoon, its beauty now seemed even more precious. At this time, the sky was white, and the red sun was about to climb out, which meant that the protection of the night was about to end. Luoqiu learned a little about transformed monsters from Yi. Most of the monsters who were able to conceal their true forms would blend into society and the crowd. They lived like ordinary people. Of course, there were also many monsters who did not want to come into contact with humans and would choose to hide in remote or inaccessible places. If the butterfly monster had the ability to hide its wings, it would be a rare beauty even without dressing up. Moreover, The butterfly monster gave people an ethereal feeling. No matter if it was mainly based on its appearance or temperament, it was already impeccable. You speak very fluently now. Luaccio chose not to respond to the butterfly demon's gratitude. He was curious about the butterfly demon's ability to speak. The butterfly demon said, "Yes, he hasn't broken out of his cocoon yet. His body structure isn't complete yet. Now that I have completed the structure of my vocal cords, it doesn't matter if I speak." Luaccio nodded and said, "You've successfully transformed. What do you plan to do next? To reconnect with human society, or to become a free monster in the mountains?" The butterfly demon thought for a while and said, "I want to see this world. Do you have any suggestions?" Luaccio was stunned. He was still a student in school in name, so he couldn't say that he completely understood the so-called society. But if he couldn't answer the question, he would feel embarrassed. So, like an old monk telling a story, he said, "I think you need a name first." "Name?" Luochi smiled and said, "When people come to this world, they start with a name." "I don't have a name." The butterfly demon shook its head and suddenly raised its head. Its eyes flashed. Can you give me a name?" It was like framing an artist's work. Giving a beautiful name like the butterfly demon would make the already beautiful thing even more beautiful. Instantly, Luaccio had a stupid desire to try. He lowered his head and looked into the distance, from the riverbank. He looked at the sky and the distance. He looked at the gradually rising sun. Not long ago, the fluorescent light of the river and the magnificence of the moonlight still lingered in his mind. In the end, he stopped at the scene where the butterfly monster flew out gracefully. He couldn't help but softly recite, sucking and spitting on the fragrant fish, dancing and dancing on the side of the wine bottle. Luaccio suddenly turned around and looked at the butterfly demon like a child showing a painting, dancing. Although it's very strange, if you think it's acceptable, what do you think of the name dancing? Dancing. The butterfly demon lowered its head and repeated the name several times. Then it raised its head and nodded with a smile. The butterfly demon was reborn overnight and got a name. The beautiful golden-beaked butterfly opened its wings and flew into the air. A light ball slowly fell from the butterfly demon's hand and finally fell into Luaccio's palm. It was the jade plate used as the transaction fee. "Thank you. If there's a chance, I hope we can meet again." The butterfly demon spread its wings and flew towards the direction of the rising sun. Luaccio held the jade plate and looked at it for a long time. Then he turned around and looked at you. He said softly, "I know a bun shop that sells delicious buns and freshly squeezed soy milk." While eating the buns he just bought, Luaccio carefully looked at the white jade plate he got from the butterfly demon. It felt like cream, and he couldn't bear to put it down. But in the end, he had to make a choice. Was it better to sacrifice 70 days of lifespan or 20 days of lifespan for the next step? On the way back, Luaccio asked Yi for her opinion. Then the very loyal puppet said something in the common language that gave him a strong sense of déjà vu master. "As long as you're happy, let's keep it for now. It's not worth it to use 20 days to appraise it, and we don't have that much money. But it's too much of a pity to sacrifice it immediately." Luaccio said to himself, he would keep this thing until his remaining lifespan came to an end. If he was so unlucky that he couldn't complete a single transaction, then he could use this jade token to extend his life. But if it was for a long time, then he should know the secret of this jade plate, right? "Luaccio, why are you smiling like a fool? You woke up so early today." Ren Xialing walked out of the room with her fluffy hair. She looked like she hadn't woken up yet. Luaccio pointed at the steamed buns and soy milk on the coffee table in the living room and said softly, "You woke up early too." Ren Xialing yawned and sat next to Luaccio. She put her hand on his shoulder and smiled. "Kid, are you a bit weird these 2 days? You can tell me. I'll play the role of a life mentor." Luaccio moved away and turned on the TV with the remote control. Ren Xialing didn't mind. She reached out and grabbed the steamed buns in the bag. Luocio couldn't help but frown. Did you brush your teeth? Ren Xiling blinked and said, Wouldn't it be cleaner if I wash up after eating? You're really a life mentor, Luocio said sarcastically. Ren Xiling shrugged and put down the steamed buns. She noticed the jade pendant that Luocio put on the coffee table. She reached out and grabbed it. Do we have this at home? Now we have it. Ren Xiling weighed it and frowned. I seem to have seen it somewhere. Where is it? Luocio's heart was moved, but he calmly grabbed the jade plate back. He stood up and said, You can tell me when you remember it. But before that, you really need to wash up. Do you know that women who smoke for a long time have heavy breath when they wake up during the day? Ren Xiling immediately put her hands together and sighed. She said quite naturally, You don't. So are you going to brush your teeth or not? Luocio grabbed the bag of steamed buns on the coffee table. Ren Xiling rushed to the bathroom with a sense of defeat. Luocio looked at the jade pendant in his hand again and pondered. The morning news reported the latest inquiries. The dignified female anchor said with perfect articulation, Today, the Everlasting Heart Group will announce the latest development project. According to the news, the company will cooperate with a well-known industrial company in this city, Golden Eagle Manufacturing. Luocio took a look and found that it should be the project developed by Chao Ziqian and his real estate company. However, the incident of the chairman of Golden Eagle Manufacturing, Jin Zifu, was not reported. But Luocio knew that Jin Zifu was sent to a good sanatorium by Chao Ziqian. Chapter 15. Genius 1. Second, remember love, go, / little. I will provide you with wonderful novels to read. PS1. Thank you for the tip from my book friend, Dusk Beetle. PS2. I was sent to buy materials for making dumplings early in the morning, so I have been making dumplings since I came back. I found that I am good at making dumplings. Sorry for the late update. Please bookmark and recommend me. PS3. Happy Dragon Boat Festival. Yen 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 Guyuzhai. People in the circle would have heard of this name as the most famous and powerful antique store in the city. Almost all of Guyuzhai's customers were celebrities. Ren Xiling said that she had seen this jade pendant in Guyuzhai. It was said that not long ago, when Ren Xiling interviewed the boss of Guyuzhai, she saw this jade pendant in some of the collections. Luocio asked Ren Xiling what kind of person the boss of Guyuzhai was. Ren Xiling frowned, gnashing her teeth. An old woman who is definitely still going through menopause. It was rare to see such an expression on Ren Xiling's face. Luocio cast an inquiring look at her directly. Ren Xiling said, You are so weird. You said you didn't want to see me when you came in. It's spring and flowers are blooming, but the room is as cold as winter. Even your words are cold. Luocio said indifferently, I heard you are a reporter. Ren Xiling snorted and said, So what if they're reporters? Reporters can't have personal feelings. Besides, I am very professional when I write a report. I will never be biased. But that old woman is not good, but her granddaughter is, well, she is about the same age as you. Love, go, little, say, W. Chu Luocio looked at the scenery outside the window, holding his chin, and said indifferently, I am 20 years old. I have a normal sexual orientation, but I don't plan to find a girlfriend for the time being. So stop acting like a matchmaker, and don't talk when you're driving. You are a female driver. Just wait and see. I will definitely help you settle down as soon as possible. I promised your father that I would make you happy. Then I can hold a chubby grandchild. Seeing that Ren Xiling's fighting spirit was suddenly ignited, Luocio pointed to the front and said in alarm, Be careful, the car! Female drivers were really scary. Fortunately, they arrived at Guyuzhai safely. Ren Xiling was the deputy chief editor of the newspaper office, so she had a lot of freedom in her job. As for Luocio, that old professor probably felt that it would be a good start to the day if no one came to class. so he could just leave class and do research on his own things, or something like that. I remember it's Miss Rin. The receptionist in charge of serving Luocio, and Rin Xiling was Guyu Zhai's receptionist. She was pretty and gave people a good impression. You remember me? Rin Xiling asked curiously. The receptionist smiled and said, in our line of work, it is very important to remember the customers. Miss Rin had come here twice in total and had done an exclusive interview. I also read that report. It was really well written. Ren Xiling smiled sweetly and said, thank you. After serving tea, the receptionist said that she would inform the manager and then left. At this moment, Ren Xiling suddenly touched Luocio with her elbow and whispered to him, Boy, what do you think of this girl? She is pretty, quiet, and polite. She seems to be about the same age as you. Are you interested in her? Maybe I can be the go-between. Luocio sighed. I should have asked you for the address and come here myself. Ren Xiling shook her head and sighed. Look at you. You are already 20 years old. Other children have already started to have babies at the age of 17 or 18. Are you really going to wait until I'm old before giving birth to a grandson for me? I won't be at that age in another 10 years. Don't worry. I think you have taken good care of yourself. Luocio said indifferently. Ren Xiling said proudly, you really know what is good for you, boy. She put her arm around Luocio's shoulder and laughed. But it doesn't matter. If you don't like the one just now, I promise you that the one coming out later will be Shihuang. Let me tell you, it is very difficult to find such an old-fashioned woman in this society. Luocio didn't even bother to mock her. What should he say? Even his own mother couldn't compare to her. Chief Editor Ren. At this moment, a beautiful woman's voice suddenly sounded. The two of them looked at the same time and saw a woman wearing a cheongsam walking leisurely. It was a long cheongsam with light green lotus flowers embroidered with golden threads. The collar was long and white sleeves, with a blue silk belt and a pair of light white flats. She was tall and slender, with a perfect beauty under her crescent moon eyebrows. She had a slender waist and a plump chest. Her hair was done up simply and was only decorated with white hairpins. Luocio opened his mouth slightly and was quite surprised. Ren Xiling couldn't help but push Luocio and said in a low voice, You said you weren't interested? Are you stunned now? Chief Editor Rin, I think your friend is more shocked than stunned. The woman smiled sweetly. Luocio, I didn't expect to meet you here. It's quite unexpected. Luocio nodded. Ren Xiling looked back and forth between the two of them and said in surprise, Do you know each other? Luocio had to say, This woman is called Zhang Qingrui. She was my classmate for more than a year. Zhang Qingrui said softly, Luocio, isn't it a bit too much to call your classmate this woman? Luocio had to say, Zhang Qingrui, my classmate in college. Zhang Qingrui pursed her lips and smiled. You're still the same, always saying some unpleasant words. She shook her head and looked at Luocio and Ren Xiling, asking in confusion, What's the relationship between you two? Chief Editor Ren, so you're Luocio's mother. Zhang Qingrui was quite surprised, but didn't continue to ask this question after expressing her surprise. Instead, she said, Why are you suddenly interested in antiques? After Luocio's hint, Ren Xiling didn't mention the jade pendant, but only said that her son suddenly became interested in antiques. She couldn't stand her son's begging, so she had to be a kind mother and help her son. Yes, I'm suddenly interested. Luocio nodded. This was King, awkward again. However, Zhang Qingrui had known Luocio for a long time. Although they weren't close friends, they were classmates in the same major, and there were only two of them. So it was inevitable that they would observe each other when they occasionally met in class. He was a very quiet guy who could be in a daze until the class was over, but he would say hello, which was the minimum level of interpersonal communication. Probably because they met under such circumstances, Zhang Qingrui felt that she talked more with Luocio than in recent months. Well, no problem. Zhang Qingrui was also very hospitable. What do you want to see? I can show you something. If you like something, I won't cheat you. Luoqiu looked around. This was the lobby of Guyuzhai, and there were many antique porcelains on display cabinets. But he didn't see the jade pendant that Ren Xiling talked about. He shook his head. Is there anything else? I'm talking about the relatively good collections. Ren Xiling quickly chimed in. Miss Zhang, the collection that you showed me last time. Can you broaden my willful child's horizons? Okay, then come in with me. Zhang Qingrui dodged slightly and made an inviting gesture. This scene happened to be seen by two young people who walked in one after another. The one in front was handsome, and the one behind was also not bad, but the latter was much worse than the former, probably a follower. Child Zhong, who is that man? Why did Miss Zhang invite him in person? Chapter 16. A Genius Remembers Love in 1 Second. This is a wonderful novel for you to read. The footman didn't dare to say no. It took him a lot of effort to get close to young Master Zhong. If he left a bad impression on young Master Zhong and got replaced, all his efforts over the years would be in vain. Moreover, young Master Zhong came from a very mysterious family. Even though he was finally valued by young Master Zhong and was allowed to follow him, he still didn't know the background of this family. It wasn't that he didn't want to know, but he didn't dare to. He didn't dare to talk too much. Young Master Zhong would tell you what he should know and what he shouldn't know when he was happy, but when he was unhappy, he didn't dare to be too smart and try to figure it out. At the same time, he understood that young Master Zhong was different from those useless, rich, second-generation young masters. He was a real capable person who didn't show his emotions easily. They had been here for about a month. Every week, young Master Zhong would come to Guyuzhai to chat with the eccentric old woman. Apparently, the real owner of Guyuzhai was a very difficult old woman to deal with. She had never treated young Master Zhong well. Sometimes the footman felt that he couldn't stand it, but his boss was calm and collected. Therefore, the footman didn't dare to be careless. If this kind of boss did something wrong, he was afraid that he would not have a good ending. But if he did the right thing, he would get even more out of it. The footman knew that young Master Zhong must be interested in the old woman's granddaughter, because every time he left, he would sit in Zhang Qingrui's office and didn't hide his admiration. But the girl didn't seem to be interested in him. Later, the footman asked some people about Zhang Qingrui's situation. He knew that she was still a student, but she usually took care of the affairs in Guyuzhai. He didn't hear that she had a relationship with anyone, so she should be single. Then the footman found a suitable time to tell young Master Zhong. Young Master Zhong didn't blame him for being nosy. He just nodded and said that he got it. But that day, young Master Zhong was in a good mood. He bought a jade plate from an antique shop and gave it to Zhang Qingrui. The footman knew that he made the right bet, so he paid more attention to Zhang Qingrui's affairs. I don't like you. You don't look like someone important. Just as he was contemplating whether he should have a good talk about the background of the young man invited by Miss Zhang, he suddenly heard something that sent a chill down his spine. This damned old woman. But the lackey didn't dare to refute anything. His boss was acting so gentle in front of this nasty old woman. This old woman was annoying, but at least it proved that she could not be provoked. Therefore, he looked at the floor and pretended not to hear anything. If the old madam doesn't like it, then let him wait outside. Young Master Zhong smiled, turned around, and said indifferently, Chunyin, you wait outside. Follower. Chunyin dared not show any dissatisfaction. He nodded and walked out of the room silently. This was the office of the real boss of Guyuzhai. Although there was a very modern plate outside, the decoration style of the room was antique. The room was filled with screens, wooden porch, and bluestone slabs. A mortise and tenon structure was placed on the porch, leaning against the window. There was a bead curtain hanging at the porch. Inside the porch was a small desk made of rosewood. On the left was a pen holder and an inkstone. On the right was a stack of ancient books. In the corner of the room was a replica of Jiu Shaohuanpei. The body of the zither was clean. Obviously, it was not placed there often. Seeing Cheng Yin leave, old Madame Zhang gently waved the silk fan in her hand and said slowly, "Zhong's son is very patient. He's much better than your old man who is always like a gunpowder. Old Madame, grandfather has been concentrating on calligraphy and painting these years. He's much more peaceful now." "Young Master Zhong," replied. Old Madame Zhang said, "I left the capital dozens of years ago. To put it bluntly, I just want to tell the people there that I, Zhang Li Fanglan, don't want to meddle in their affairs. I just want to enjoy my old age here. But one wouldn't visit a temple for no reason. I guess old Zhong didn't ask you to come here because he remembered the past." Old Madame Zhang looked at young Master Zhong. Although her hair was gray, her complexion was ruddy. She had a sense of oppression without being angry. "I think you've learned the rules these days. You're not impatient. I like the calmness of young people. I'll give you a chance to tell me your story." Young Master Zhong took a deep breath and showed a trace of joy. His efforts these days were not in vain. He thought for a while and said softly, "Luochen once heard some secrets from an old man in my family. He said there are all kinds of strange things in the world. It's not something we mortals can understand." He paused and then said in an even steadier voice, "I heard that there is such a place in the world that can fulfill any wish of a person. This junior doesn't know much, but the old man who told me also said that old Madame is the one who understands it the most." Old Madame Zhang suddenly sneered, "Kid, you're really arrogant. You're even more reckless. Do you know that the place you're talking about is not a holy mountain, but a place where people make deals with demons?" Young Master Zhong looked happy. The legend is true. "Old Madame, you know that place, and even you've been there." Old Madame Zhang waved the fan in her hand and turned hostile. "I'm not feeling well today. Go away. Don't come here again." Looking at old Madame Zhang's cold expression, Zhong Luochen calmly reached into his pocket and took out a brocade pouch from his suit. After opening it, he poured out the contents. Old Madame Luochen knows that he was indeed a little too hasty, but time doesn't allow Luochen to slow down here. "Today I got the news from home, so Luochen has to offend you. What fell out was a jade lock." Old Madame Zhang's eyes slightly changed. She gently put the jade lock in her palm and carefully rubbed it. Finally she sighed and said, "That year when I left that place, I couldn't bear to part with my poor sister who had been with me since childhood. So I gave her this jade lock. Do you really want to use this favor? Grandmother gave it to me before she died." Zhong Luochen said softly, she said, that if the Zhong family is in trouble, this is the only thing that can save us. I didn't want to use it. If it weren't for old Madame's deep fear of that place, Luochen wouldn't want to take it out. Old Madame Zhang held the jade lock in her palm and took a deep breath. "You go back first. I need to think about this matter carefully." Zhong Luochen nodded solemnly. "I hope old Madame can give me an answer as soon as possible." "Tell me the reason first." Old Madame Zhang said. Zhong Luochen said, "To be honest, it's about my grandfather. Old Madame, the doctor said that the hot-tempered old Zhong, you know, is dying." There was a dazzling array of treasures, and all he saw were valuable treasures. Luo Chiu admitted that he didn't know much about antiques, but he could feel the simple and unadorned aura of the things placed here. But he didn't see the white jade token mentioned by Ren Xiling. Knowing the purpose of Luocho's visit, Ren Xiling looked at Zhang Qingrui and asked, "Miss Zhang, is there something missing here? I remember there were some small things when I came here last time." "Zhang," Qingrui smiled. "Chief Editor Rin is really a reporter. Your eyesight and memory are really good. Yes, some things were sent away from the collection room." She took out a picture album from a small shelf next to her and opened it. "These should be the only things left. We sent these things to the auction house and planned to auction them." Rin Xiling had sharp eyes, but Luocho's eyes were sharper. He saw the white jade token printed on the picture album at first glance. Because of this white jade token, Luocio directly took the picture album from Zhang Qingrui's hand. This was probably a very rude behavior, but Luocio stared at the picture album and began to look at it carefully. But Rin Xiling was embarrassed. She had to look at Zhang Qingrui apologetically. My Luocio is also like this. When he sees something he likes, he does this. Zhang Qingrui shook her head. We have printed a lot of pictures of this picture album. If you like it, you can take it back. Luocio nodded. Obviously, he didn't want to be polite, but he still maintained the bottom line of human relations, or he remembered the bottom line in this respect. So he added, Thank you. Since he knew the white jade token was no longer here, Luocio didn't want to stay. He walked towards the door while looking at the picture album. Rin Xiling looked helpless. She basically skipped work today and even asked for favors. But this guy left as soon as he saw the thing was no longer here. He didn't want to leave any leeway at all. Zhang Qingrui also felt a little embarrassed, but she was well-mannered since she was young, so she didn't want to say anything. For the sake of their friendship, Ren Xiling couldn't stand it in the end. She directly pulled Luocio's arm and said with a fake smile, Since you are here, take a good look. She enunciated the words, take a look, very clearly, and her hand that grabbed Luocio's arm was also very strong. Luocio had no choice but to look at it casually, but suddenly he frowned and walked towards the corner of the collection room. What's this? Luocio pointed at the glass cover in the corner, a black card that he couldn't be more familiar with. On the black card, there were 2 dark golden marks. Chapter 17. Genius 1, Second Remember Love, /go, /little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Rin Xiling was confused about the black card that Luocio noticed. She murmured, Was there this thing last time? Why don't I have any impression of it? Luocio understood Rin Xiling's confusion and knew the reason. The black card in front of him was indeed an item of the club. It might have been placed here all the time, but few people would notice its existence. It wasn't that they couldn't see it, but they just turned a blind eye to it. This black card had the ability to make ordinary people not care about it, just like the existence of the club itself. Even if it was in the middle of the road, people who should see it would see it, but people who didn't need to see it wouldn't see it. Well, it's here. Maybe Editor Rin didn't notice it last time. Zhang Qingrui's face didn't change. She looked at Luocio naturally and said, Are you interested in this black card? The existence of every black card represented a potential source of customers for the club. Of course, these were things left by the previous boss, but it was impossible to say that he wasn't interested. But Luocio felt it was inappropriate to show his interest directly. Therefore, he shook his head and said, Not really. I just find it strange. He looked at Zhang Qingrui. This black card doesn't look like an antique, but it's here. If you want to say that you care about it, it's probably the incongruity. Zhang Qingrui smiled. A customer once asked this question. How do you think I answered? Luocio shook his head directly, with a look of, You can say it if you want, but it doesn't matter if you don't want to say it. Zhang Qingrui was stunned, thinking that this guy really didn't want to talk casually. They were classmates, and there were a few days in a month when they didn't see each other often. Although it wasn't necessary to know him, people were curious by nature. She would want to know more about this guy who always kept silent. But Zhang Qingrui didn't care too much about it. Luocio didn't intend to open his heart, so she didn't have to pester him to open it. They were not related to each other in the first place. They were just fated to meet in the same class. But it was also a fate that could disappear at any time. No comment. Thinking of this, Zhang Qingrui slowly told him the answer. When Rin Xiling heard this, she was stunned. She thought that Luocio, this unromantic guy, had probably upset the girl, so he played a little prank on her, so she didn't say anything. She had been a reporter for many years and was very observant. Now that she heard Qingrui Zhang's words, she knew that this was a disguised excuse to chase them out. Ren Xiling pretended to look at the time on her phone and then said with a look of realization, "It's already so late? I'm sorry, Miss Zhang. I just remembered that I still have places to interview." "Well, thank you for your hospitality today. Also, my family's luocho is a piece of wood, so don't take offense. Since we're classmates, we can keep in touch when we have time. Since we're classmates, it's natural for us to be good friends. This kid is actually very good, kind-hearted, and—" "Hey, stupid luocho, I haven't finished yet, but you." King idiot luocho, who felt that he couldn't afford to lose face, sighed and walked out first. Rin Xiling quickly said a few words and then hurried out. Zhang Qingrui didn't stop smiling until the two left the storage room. The woman in a long cheongsam frowned slightly, looking at the black card on the display. Suddenly, she opened the glass cabinet and wanted to touch it, but her fingers stopped in front of the black card, seeming to hesitate for a while, and then she took it back and closed it again. The young female general manager of Guyu Zhai frowned. She started to manage Guyu Zhai in the last 2 years, but she had seen a lot of celebrities. However, there weren't many people who would pay special attention to the black cards in the storage room. She knew that it was put here by her grandma, the real owner of Guyu Zhai. She had asked for the reason, but she couldn't get an answer. Her grandma shook her head silently, as if she was afraid of something. This black card seemed to have a magical power. As long as one stopped to look at it, he or she would want to grab it. Zhang Qingrui was probably the person who had seen the black card the most besides her grandma, so this feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Not only her. Even the guests who noticed the black card would be unable to move their eyes away. Only when they woke up could they get rid of it. There were also customers who expressed that they could directly name a price, no matter how expensive it was, as long as they could get the black card. But it was a pity that it was not for sale, so she didn't understand why her grandma put it here. Qingrui. Zhang Qingrui heard her grandma's voice when she was absent-minded. The little girl was startled. She quickly turned around and walked quickly to old Madame Zhang. She held her arm and said, "Grandma, why did you come down? I don't usually see you in the storage room." "I suddenly wanted to come down and have a look," Mrs. Zhang said slowly and then frowned. "How many times have I told you not to look at the black card too much?" Zhang Qingrui's parents died when she was young. She was brought up by Zhang Lilinfang. She loved, respected, and feared her grandma. She stuck out her tongue and said, "I was entertaining 2 guests just now." "I didn't pay attention," the old madam suddenly sighed, but she also walked towards the location of the black card. She stood still in front of the cabinet, murmuring to herself, "I shouldn't have kept it that year." "Grandma?" Zhang Qingrui asked with confusion. Mrs. Zhang shook her head. "Girl, take it out and put it in a box. I want to use it. It should have been put here when Guyu Zhai was built, and it had never been taken out for so many years." Zhang Qingrui couldn't help but feel curious about it. She asked directly, "Grandma, what's going on?" "I think I just saw that young master Zhong came looking for you again. Is it?" Old Madame Zhang nodded, but then shook her head. Finally, she said, "Although the one surnamed Zhong is a very outstanding young man, he's made too many mistakes. You'd better not get too close." Zhang Qingrui didn't say anything, but she thought, "I know when that guy will come. If I don't want to hide from him, I won't take Rin Xiling and Luocho here." Zhang Qingrui took out the black card and put it in the box according to her grandma's instructions. Old Madame Zhang said, "Next time, if the man surnamed Zhong comes again, give this to him. But remember to tell him that he can only use it once and return it at once. Otherwise, he will have to bear the consequences." Zhang Qingrui was curious, but her grandma didn't want to say more, so she nodded. She did mention that someone noticed the black card. In fact, it wasn't a big deal. "Master, what's this?" At noon, Ren Xiling left Luocho at a bus stop and then stepped on the gas pedal to show the horror of a female driver. Then she rushed away. Since he had already skipped classes for half a day, Luoqiu decided to skip all the classes for the day. He went straight back to the club and began to carefully study the atlas given by Guyu Zhai. Well, I don't know how to use it yet, Luochio said casually, but he suddenly remembered something. He looked at Yu Yi and asked, "Oh, I remember there are some masks in the warehouse on the first floor of the basement. Help me take them out." He could use the things in the club freely, which were the accumulation of the club for a long time. Now it was time to talk about one of the rules of the club. Items that were stored in the warehouse couldn't be sacrificed. That was to say, if Luochio chose to store the transaction fee in the future, he couldn't offer it as a sacrifice. Moreover, the owner of the club had to pay for the transaction fee with his lifespan. It sounded like a trap. But in fact, if it was used as the transaction fee, there was a time limit of protection under the club's contract. During this period, the transaction fee couldn't be used. There were only two ways to store the transaction fee or sacrifice it. Okay, wait a minute, master. Yu Yi didn't ask why. Just like the owner of the club had to follow the rules in the manual, Yu Yi, as a puppet maid, had to follow the owner's order unconditionally. Seeing Yi go to get the item, Luochio touched his face and said to himself, Zhang Qingrui has the black card, which is troublesome. What if she comes with a black card that day? That would be bad. Thinking deeper, Luochio felt that he couldn't use the identity of Luochio when he appeared as the owner of the club in the future. Chapter 18. Genius 1 second, remember, love divided by small, say net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Soon after, Yu Yi brought the masks that Luochio needed. These 3 masks were naturally left behind by the previous owner. The next difficult choice was to make. At first, they were only used to cover his face in future transactions and to hide his identity. But after these 3 masks were taken out, each one was quite exquisite. Luochio picked up one of them and carefully touched the decoration on it. This was undoubtedly a Venetian mask, and it was a half-face type of bada. The molding was also unusually gorgeous. Luochio put it on, subconsciously. A feeling of sticking to his face spread out, but soon disappeared. In the end, it seemed to have completely integrated with his skin. Not only did it not feel dull at all, but it even seemed that he could not feel the weight of his face. Hypocritical mask, invisibility after wearing. Such a message suddenly flowed into Luochio's mind. He looked at Yu Yi curiously and said, "Can you see me now?" Visually, no, Yu Yi said indifferently, but Yu Yi can feel the existence of the owner. Luochio was stunned. He took a mirror and looked at it, and found that he had disappeared in the mirror. After fiddling with it for a while, he took off this bada. Although it could make him invisible, it seemed to be of no use. He just wanted the customer not to know his identity, not to directly make himself invisible. But as a gadget, it seemed to be good. Luochio picked up the second mask. It was a pulp mask. Although it was made of pulp, the hardening technology was good. It was a white mask with golden eyes and split lips painted with red paint. It was actually a Japanese fox mask. Luochio also tried to wear it. The face of the Inari god, you can pray for a bumper harvest. Love, go, small, say, W, chuhum. It might be useful in ancient or modern times where farming techniques were not good. However, the Japanese fox mask didn't match Luochio's outfit at all, so it wasn't of much use to him. He had to pick up the third mask, a clown mask. After putting it on, he didn't feel any discomfort. Just like when he put on the measuring mask, the information about this clown mask flowed into his mind. The true clown, the ability to see through all magic tricks. The so-called magic here was the kind of performance that used special methods and props to deceive one's vision, not the kind of magic that used supernatural abilities. Luckily, it's just a fair-faced clown. If it's a colorful one, then hee-hee. Luochio said to amuse himself. No customers are willing to come in. Would the boss they see be Uncle Mai? Yu Yi obviously didn't understand, so she didn't express her opinion. I'll take this. Although the ability is still useless, it's still better than the other 2. Luochio stood up. He didn't look funny with the clown mask. On the contrary, because of the servant girl's outfit, Luocio with the clown mask had a mysterious and playful feeling. But there seemed to be something missing. Luocio looked left and right in front of the full-body mirror, trying to find out what was missing. At this time, Yu Yi took out a top hat, a black cane, and a set of white gloves from the cloakroom. Luocio put on the top hat and gloves and waved the cane in his hand casually. It felt pretty good. Call me Mr. Clown in the future, Luocio said with a playful smile. In this place of desire, having a clown feels pretty good. Master, as long as you're happy. Luocio wanted to complain, but at this time, the wind chime in the club's lobby rang. Luocio muttered and went downstairs. He had just put on a new dress, and now there was a guest waiting for him. What a coincidence! He saw a young man standing nervously at the entrance. He didn't choose to walk in directly, but instead he observed the surroundings. Although he was young, Luocio estimated that this person was probably a few years older than him. It was easy to see a person's nature and temperament from their behavior. This was probably a well-educated, rich young master or a successful person. Welcome. This is the Terrace Trading Club. May I ask how I can help you? Esteemed customer. With both hands holding the cane behind his back, Luocio walked down the stairs step by step and observed the young man's reaction. You are. However, the young man was still very careful and did not choose to take a step in. He still stood at the entrance, and his expression became even more alert. Me. Luocio intended to smile, but then he realized that he was wearing a mask, so he said indifferently, I'm the owner of the club. You can call me boss, or you can call me Mr. Clown. Loki walked to the front of the young man and smelled a familiar smell, the smell of a black card. Yes, this was the third time he had come to trade with them, except for Agile, who came in by herself. All of them were black card holders. How many black cards did the club give out before? Luocio couldn't help muttering again, but he didn't stop talking with the customer. Customer, don't you want to come in? Can any wish be granted here? The young man frowned and asked. Luocio suddenly snapped his fingers and then opened his palm. A black card floated above his palm. He then said with a smile, Customer, since you come here with a card, you should have confidence in this place. The young man subconsciously touched his chest and even pulled open his suit jacket. Looking at the inner pocket, he found that the black card that was originally hidden there had disappeared. He took a deep breath and calmed down quickly, saying in a low voice, Hello, Mr. Clown. My name is Zhong Luochen. I'm here to make a deal with you. One couldn't neglect a customer. Luocio politely made an inviting gesture and said cheerfully, Yu Yi, greet the customer. It was natural to sweat on a hot day, but if one was still sweating in a room with an air conditioner of 18 degrees, then of course it was because they had done something intense. Chang Yin lit a cigarette and looked at the charming woman lying on the bed with satisfaction. She was a receptionist of Guyuzhai. She didn't have a strong background, but she was pretty and smart. She also wanted to climb up, so she chose the fastest and most effective way. Chang Yun knew what this woman wanted, because he knew what a woman wanted. Therefore, before his boss got Zhang Qingrui, he had already gotten this receptionist. Of course, although this receptionist was good, she couldn't compare with Zhang Qingrui, who was the best in terms of family background and knowledge. However, Chang Yun was self-aware. He knew what kind of woman he could mess with casually and what kind of woman he couldn't touch at present. Why are you so free this time? Don't you need to follow your young boss? The receptionist looked at Cheng Yin with a charming smile. Cheng Yin was also wondering about this matter. After leaving Guyuzhai in the morning, Zhong Luochen hurried back to Guyuzhai in the afternoon. After that, Zhong Luochen sent him away and went off to an unknown place by himself. Ever since he came to the city, Cheng Yin had been working hard, but now he was sent away. He even wondered if Zhong Luochen suddenly gave him the cold shoulder because of the old woman's words during the day. Damn it, I can't go on like this. Otherwise, all my hard work will be in vain. For example, this woman was so scheming. If she knew that he had lost his ability, she would turn against him immediately. Although he was such a scheming person, his kung fu was indeed very good. He also wanted to continue playing for a few more days. Most importantly, he still wanted to stay by Zhong Luoqin's side and gain more trust. This way, his status in the capital would be higher. During the day, I saw your family's Miss Zhang seemed to have personally invited 2 people to the storage room. May I know who they are? The woman knew that Cheng Yin always cared about Zhang Qingrui. She also knew that he was trying to please her boss. But it didn't matter, as long as this man could give her what she wanted. Therefore, she didn't hesitate to tell Cheng Yin what she knew about Zhang Qingrui's hobbies. That woman is a deputy editor of a local newspaper. She has been here twice before. The woman recalled. I just met her at that time. As for the other man, I don't know. He was brought here by Ren Xiling, but they seemed to be very close. Maybe he was a good friend or a younger brother. Chapter 19. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. There were 2 marks on the black card. Usually there would be 3 marks, but sometimes there would be 4. Each mark represented a discount on the transaction fee. For example, when there were 3 marks, the first mark could be used for 70% discount, then 80% discount, and the last mark could be used for 10% discount. When Jean Zifu brought the black card here for the first time, there was only 1 mark left on the black card. That kind of black card was actually invalid. The one that Luoqiu gave to Chao Ziqian later was the one that he put a new mark on. As for the black card with the 4th mark, feel the feeling of a 40% discount on the originally generous transaction fee. So interesting, Luoqiu thought. This black card seems to be the one that I met in Guyuzhai today. But it didn't matter who had the black card. The key was that the card holder had arrived. At this time, Zhong Luoqin had already sat down, and Luoqiu had already sat opposite him. Yu Yi had already served the meticulously prepared flower tea. But it was a pity that no matter who came in, they didn't seem to have the mood to taste it. It would eventually become cold and dry. Mr. Zhong, do you know the rules here? Luoqiu suddenly asked. If he got this black card from Guyuzhai, then it was hard to guess how much he knew about the club. There would also be times when it was necessary to explain the rules of the club to the customer. Mr. Clown, please tell me. Zhong Luoqin calmed down and looked at Luoqiu calmly. In his opinion, when facing such a mysterious unknown, it was best to put away one's superiority as an ordinary person and maintain the utmost politeness and modesty. Luoqiu said, the card holder is a member of the club. You have 2 marks left on the black card, so you can still enjoy the transaction discount for 2 more times. Zhong Luoqin nodded. He thought, no wonder Madame Zhang hesitated when I took out the jade lock. It's because the origin of this black card is really extraordinary. Then, you can enjoy a 20% discount now. After this, it will be 10% off. Luoqiu said indifferently, it was originally 30% off, but it has already been used once. Zhong Luoqin nodded again. Mr. Clown, I understand now, but I would like to confirm something. Is it true that you can buy anything here? Luoqiu said, of course, that's impossible. If what you want to buy is something like the destruction of the world, do you think we have the ability to sell it to you? After all, if the world doesn't exist, our club will go bankrupt. Zhong Luoqin nodded in agreement. Unexpectedly, Luoqiu suddenly said faintly, besides, you can't afford the transaction fee of destroying the world, even with the discount. Zhong Luoqin's heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Was this a joke or something else? Luoqiu said again, we've digressed. Let's talk about what you want. He was like a scammer. Wealth? Fame and fortune? Women? Or was it power? As long as you want it and can pay the price. I want to buy my life. Zhong Luoqin took a deep breath and said solemnly. After saying that, he nervously but calmly looked at Luoqiu's every move. Although the other party was wearing a clown mask, he could still see something from his body language. But he couldn't see anything. The clown in front of him didn't move at all. He just stared at him quietly until Zhong Luoqin broke out in cold sweat. Finally, he heard the clown say, "Of course, no problem. Who does Mr. Zhong want to buy? And what do you want to buy this life with? Oh, right, I forgot to tell you that we don't accept money here." "My grandfather," Zhong Luoqin said in a low voice. "He has a brain tumor and is now in a coma. We have invited the best doctors in and out of the country, but they can't treat him. I just hope that he can get through this difficult time." Luoqiu said, "Customer, I don't care what illness your grandfather has. What I care is that you want to buy your grandfather's life. How long do you want to buy? 1 year? 5 years? Or 10 years? Zhong Luoqin looked at Luoqiu and said, "How long can I buy at most?" Luoqiu said, "This is up to you to decide. How much do you think your grandfather's life is worth per minute? And then how much are you willing to bear? 10 years? No." Zhong Luoqin hesitated for a moment and said, 5 years, just 5 years is enough. As for the price, I don't know how to measure it. I hope you can tell me. But I know that although this is a secret transaction, it is also voluntary. So I believe that you won't mislead me. But you will guide me." Luoqiu was silent for a moment. His silence made Zhong Luoqin look even more uneasy. This young man seemed to want to hide his uneasiness. So he finally picked up the flower tea you made and gently sipped it. "Do you want to use 3 hours of your life to buy information on Zhong Luoqin's grandfather? Do you want to use 3 hours of your life to buy information on Zhong Luoqin?" "Yes." But this was just on the surface. Luoqiu was secretly communicating with the altar on the 3rd floor after the first successful transaction. As he said, Luoqiu's ability would gradually become stronger. For example, right now he could directly communicate with the altar with his mind and use his lifespan to exchange for the information he wanted. The altar's existence could allow Luoqiu to continuously extend his life, but it also seemed to constantly exploit his life at the same time. Because he still had the white jade card in his hand that was worth 70 days of life, Luoqiu straightforwardly chose to buy the information. Just treat it as an investment in the early stage. But suddenly his life was shortened by 6 hours. He felt a little heartache. Until Zhong Luoqin drank half of the flower tea. Luoqiu slowly said, "Sir, you should know that your grandfather's life is related to the fate of many people, whether it's you as his family or others as his enemies. If your grandfather lives for 1 more day, countless people will be able to eat and wear, and countless people will be separated from their families. And all these only require his decision." Zhong Luoqin agreed. "Because of this, we can't let him die like this." Luoqiu suddenly stretched out his hand and swept across the table, and several patterned cards appeared out of thin air on the blank table. "Customer, since you have given me the right to appraise, I will appraise it for you. Please look." Luoqiu opened the first card on the left, and the number 30 was written on it. Luoqiu explained, "You can use your 30 years of life to buy 5 years of your grandfather's life." Zhong Luoqin was stunned, and then he became angry out of embarrassment. 30 years in exchange for 5 years? What kind of deal is this? Luoqiu said indifferently, "Mr. Zhong, as far as I know in your generation, there are 3 people including you. The 3 of you have the same ability, and no one has the advantage. So the 3 of you have the same chance of inheriting the Pang family 1/3 each. In addition, the Zhong family was built by your grandfather, but even if you have outstanding ability and even inherit your family, you only need 10 years to reach your grandfather's influence now. You should have thought about this point yourself, right? Of course. 10 years is the optimal calculation. So, 10 years and 3 times it will be 30 years. Zhong Luoqin was silent for a moment. What's the second card? Luoqiu opened the second card, and the word wisdom was written on it. It was easy to understand. That was to use his life's wisdom in exchange for 5 years of his grandfather's life. In this way, his life would not be shortened and he would still be the young master of the Zhong family, but he would probably become mediocre. In fact, it meant to use one's life in exchange. Obviously, this was something that Zhong Luoqin could not accept. What's the third card? Zhong Luoqin subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Luoqiu gently opened the third card, and the word happiness was written on it. What does this mean? Zhong Luoqin frowned, puzzled. Luoqiu said indifferently, "It's very simple, no matter what you get in the future. You will not be able to feel any happiness. You will not be able to feel the preciousness of love. You will forget how rare family affection is. You will lose the joy of having descendants, and even the satisfaction will leave you. No matter what you do, how you do it." Looking at Zhong Luoqin's silent appearance, Luoqiu reached out and was about to open the fourth card. Unexpectedly, Zhong Luoqin suddenly shouted, "No need. I'll use my happiness as the transaction fee." Luoqiu was slightly surprised. "Mr. Zhong, you should understand that it is one of your rights to see to the end." Zhong Luoqin sneered, "I'm afraid it will only be worse if I see to the end. This is indeed a place to make a deal with the devil. I can't use my life to exchange for it, and I won't give up my wisdom. This is the reason why you choose happiness." Zhong Luoqin raised his head and said confidently, "Yes. But don't forget I have a black card in my hand, so I can also enjoy a discount if I use happiness in exchange. That is to say, there are at least one or two things that can bring me a sense of satisfaction that you can't take away." Luoqiu knocked on the table. "Then what are you going to keep? Although it's only 20% discount, you can only keep one at most. Although there are many things that can bring happiness that can be summed up into a few things: love, family affection, interests, achievements, and peace of mind." "Keep my achievements," Zhong Luoqin said directly. "Are you sure? Maybe the better choice will be at the end," Luoqiu said indifferently. Zhong Luoqin shook his head. "I believe in my own feelings. It's useless to say more." Luoqiu could only nod, and then stretched out his hand again. In front of Zhong Luoqin, an old sheepskin scroll began to unfold slowly. "If the customer has decided, put your palm on it. In this way, the transaction contract will officially take effect." Zhong Luoqin directly put his palm on it. His heart suddenly contracted at this moment, and there was an almost suffocating feeling of death. Zhong Luoqin gasped for breath and looked at him in horror. Luoqiu said indifferently, "Don't worry, as long as the transaction is completed, the customer will be safe. And we give the goods first, and then collect the transaction fee. This contract is actually a small guarantee, because we don't want to see the customer who has obtained the goods not willing to pay the transaction fee." Zhong Luoqin took a deep breath. "Good. Then is my grandfather healed now?" Luoqiu shook his head. "Don't worry. The first step is to bring your grandfather to this place." "Well, you don't have to come directly to my place. Just find a place to settle down. After the first step, you should know how to find me." The black card appeared in Zhong Luoqin's pocket again, and he nodded, quickly pushed open the door of the club, and walked out of the bustling street outside. Looking at the leaving Zhong Luoqin, Luoqiu shook his head. In fact, he could take the initiative to go there, but wasn't the ability to travel, and he needed to take a transport. His ability wasn't strong enough to allow him to cross several provinces. In fact, he could only move around the city at most. As for the other reason, it was actually nothing. It was just because he was lazy. "Congratulations, master. You have negotiated a transaction." Yu Yi praised Luoqiu generously. Luoqiu took off the clown mask on his face, fanning himself. "The transaction hasn't been completed yet. No need to be happy. And because of the 20% discount, I feel that I have lost a lot. But after all, it was one of the rules." Even if he felt that he had lost a lot, Luoqiu couldn't do anything about it. But although he kept Zhong Luoqin's achievements and happiness, the value of the other things, if they were sacrificed, greatly exceeded Luoqiu's estimation. Of course, he wanted to wait until the transaction was completed. "Master, what's the fourth card?" Yu Yi asked curiously. Luocho shook his head, didn't say anything, picked up his cane and walked upstairs. Yu Yi tilted her head, but reached out and turned over the fourth card that Luocho didn't take away. It was written, "Do good deeds for 20 years." She knew that the transaction fee for the fourth card wasn't ready-made, but it required Zhong Luochen to maintain the standard of doing good deeds for the next 20 years, and he couldn't do any bad deeds. Until this period was over, the transaction would be completed. In the East's words, it was, "Do good deeds and accumulate merit," using the merit accumulated from doing good deeds for 20 years as the final transaction fee. Master, it's a bit bad. Chapter 20. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Just a quick trip, I'll be back soon, don't miss me. While reviewing the manuscript, Rin Xiling glanced at the message displayed on her phone. She was stunned at first, then slammed her hands on the table and stood up angrily. "Brat, you're playing this trick on me again. Are you all grown up?" Rin Xiling immediately dialed the number. "Sorry, the number you have dialed is unavailable." "Me!" Rin Xiling finally sat down helplessly. She had been working in this industry for many years, so her temper had been restrained. Therefore, she didn't say anything like F*CKU or fuck you. Luocho also sat down under the guidance of the stewardess. Of course, Yu Yi also accompanied him. Yu Yi changed out of the maid costume she wore in the club. Now, she was wearing a white sunscreen shirt with a light green knitted cardigan, white casual jeans, and a pair of hollow silver flats with small holes. Of course, it was another kind of feeling. Although he didn't say that he would go into Yu Ye's room, he thought that Yu Ye's closet must be full. Accompanied by a female companion, the stewardess didn't show any more enthusiasm outside of her job. But obviously the back seats, separated by curtains, were more exquisite than the business class and the ordinary class. According to the album brought by Guyu Zhai, the auction venue was not in the city where Luocho lived, but several cities away. In fact, it was out of the province. It was beyond Luocho's mobile range. If he wanted to go there, he could only choose to take a public transport. In order to get enough rest, Luocho directly chose to take a flight after learning about the club's economic situation and considering Zhong Luochen's fastest speed. Yu Yi was in charge of this matter. Come to think of it, Yu Yi must have done a lot of such work over the years. In short, when Luocho sat in the first-class seat, he basically didn't worry about anything. Luocho. Just as Luocho was about to close her eyes and take a good rest, she unexpectedly heard someone calling her name. Then, she felt very awkward to run into an acquaintance at this time. She was the eldest daughter of Guyu Zhai. Zhang Qingrui looked at them curiously with her purse, phone, and plane ticket. She frowned and asked, "Are you planning to go to the auction?" He wasn't too surprised that the other party had guessed this. After all, he had just gotten the sketches from Guyu Zhai yesterday, and now he was on a plane heading to his destination. Therefore, the first miss of Guyu Zhai, who had the same goal, would naturally think in this direction. Luocho could only nod. Probably because she was born in a business family, Zhang Qingrui kept a basic polite attitude. "Is this your companion?" "Yu Yi." Luocho nodded and introduced her, and then added, "Well, a companion who will accompany me for a long time." What a beautiful person. Zhang Qingrui smiled slightly. Women more or less had the psychology of comparison. Whether it was strong or not, intentional or not, it always existed. However, Zhang Qingrui was really amazed by Yu Yi, a woman who had all the advantages of Eastern and Western women. She was like a rose on a high mountain, very special, and Zhang Qingrui couldn't help looking at her more. After hearing Luocho's strange answer, the first miss of Guyu Zhai, who was used to all kinds of explicit and implicit words, smiled knowingly. "In that case, I won't disturb you. But, Luocho, if you plan to go to the auction site, how about letting me take you there? Because I'm also one of the organizers, it will be troublesome for you if we go together." She didn't consider whether Luocho had the purchasing power. In fact, in many auctions, there were always more onlookers than buyers, and some people just wanted to join in the fun. Besides, as classmates, Zhang Qingrui didn't want to leave an arrogant impression on him. Luocho thought for a while and said, "Okay." Zhang Qingrui returned to her seat. At this time, Yu Yi whispered in Luocho's ear, "Master, this lady's soul is so beautiful." Luocho was stunned, and then he didn't say anything. Yu Yi was hinting that Luocho could develop Zhang Qingrui as a guest of the club, but he didn't intend to do that now. Zhang Qingrui was not the only one with a beautiful soul in the world. However, among his limited acquaintances, especially those who knew Ren Xiling, Zhang Qingrui was related to both, so he didn't want to contact her as the boss of the club. Let's talk about it later. Luocho closed his eyes again to rest, but this seemingly intimate action still fell into the eyes of the stewardess and Zhang Qingrui. While they were amazed by Yu Ye's dreamy beauty, they each had their own thoughts. The stewardess hoped to meet beautiful people in these rich places, but she knew she couldn't compare with them, so she felt ashamed of her inferiority. Zhang Qingrui, on the other hand, was curious why someone would fall in love with Luocho, who was so unapproachable. Maybe it was true love. There were also women who had fantasies about love, so they secretly wished them well. The plane landed smoothly at the destination without any words on the way. Then, accompanied by Zhang Qingrui, Luocho got on the organizer's shuttle car to the auction site. The car just started, while the one on the other side stopped. It was the same time, but in different places. It was the capital city thousands of miles away. In front of him, it was not an exaggeration to call it a mansion, but more accurately, it was a villa. It was a villa under the name of the Zhong family, and also the place where the direct descendants of the Zhong family lived. "Qingyan, get ready and wait for me here," Zhong Luochen ordered, and then hurriedly walked into the villa. Qingyan didn't dare to delay. He took out his phone to arrange people, while looking at the interior of the villa with longing. Even now, he was still not qualified to enter. Zhong Luochen heard that the situation of the old master in the villa was more dangerous, so he hurriedly came back. The situation in the villa had changed, and it might change at any time. Qingyan's face was a bit gloomy. Although the internal strife in the Zhong family wasn't serious, there were turbulent undercurrents. The old master didn't appoint anyone as his successor. The 2 young masters and 1 young lady of the Zhong family were all extraordinary people. If the old master couldn't survive, then it would be wonderful. However, when they came back, Zhong Luochen ordered them to buy tickets for the return trip. Instead of 1 or 2 seats, he directly booked a first-class cabin. This made Chang Yun confused. At this time, a car drove quickly into the villa. Chang Yun knew it was the special car of the other young master of the Zhong family. At this time, except for the young lady who had been accompanying him, the 3 young masters of the Zhong family had all gathered. Of course, there were also some important people in the Zhong family who had arrived early. It can't be that the world is really going to change, right? Chapter 21. Genius 1. Second, remember love, go, /little. Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. P.S. And please add and recommend. Yen 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 yen. Second brother, you're back. Zhong Luochen glanced at his sister and didn't say anything, but asked directly, "What's the specific situation?" The third miss of the Zhong family didn't look good. The doctor said that it'll happen in 2 or 3 days. Grandfather's mind is in a daze now. He can't recognize people. Zhong Luochen nodded, pushing the door and entering. In the luxurious suite, a group of people surrounded the bed anxiously. There were also 2 doctors and 3 nurses who were paying close attention to the heart rate monitor that had been transported here. "Luochen, you're finally back." Another square-faced, middle-aged man by the bed called out at this time. Zhong Luochen hurriedly nodded and walked inside. The Zhong clan was very big, but there weren't many people who could be considered as direct descendants. Old Zhong only had 1 son and 1 daughter in his life. Zhong Luoqin's father contracted a strange disease in his early years, and since then he couldn't take care of himself. Although there were no major problems, he could only sit in a wheelchair and couldn't even speak fluently. As for Zhong Luoqin's aunt, she died in childbirth. The one who just greeted him was Zhong Luoqin's aunt's husband, Wang Guoli. Luoqin, I'm afraid that your grandfather. You'd better stay here for these 2 days. Zhong Luoqin's mother sighed. Zhong Luoqin suddenly said, Mother, get out of the way first. The 2 doctors over there. Prepare that as soon as possible. I want to transfer my grandfather to another place. It was supposed to be a sad and bleak time, but Zhong Luoqin was very decisive. The 3rd generation of the Zhong family had 3 heroes, and the bearing that Zhong Luoqin showed was shocking everyone. Almost, they didn't react from such words. Luoqin, are you crazy? At this time, another young man came from behind. The 3rd generation of the Zhong family's young master, Zhong Luoyin. He quickly walked forward. The doctor said that grandfather is about to die, so don't make trouble at this time. Do you want to see grandfather endure inhuman pain in his last moments? Luoqin, Zhong Luoqin's mother, looked at her son with confusion. Zhong Luoqin took a deep breath and said, Listen, I don't have much time to explain, but if you all want to save your grandfather's life, then do as I say. Don't hesitate at all. Zhong Luoyin frowned and said, All the top doctors in the country have already seen him. What other methods do you have? In short, it's a way to survive. Zhong Luoqin shook his head and turned around to look at the doctors. What are you guys still standing there for? I want you to get ready immediately. All of you, stop! Zhong Luoyin was instantly enraged as he grabbed his younger brother's arm. Luoqin, I don't know what you're planning to do, but if you don't make yourself clear, then don't even think of leaving this place. These past few days have truly been too sensitive, so I absolutely won't let you leave with grandfather by yourself. Little sister, which side are you on? The Zhong family's 3rd miss, who was suddenly asked, frowned. I agree with big brother, but I also want to hear 2nd brother's explanation. If there is really a way to treat him, I will be the first to support it. 2nd brother, moving grandpa is not a child's play. Then, no matter what difficulties you have to let all the elders here understand. How to say it? Tell them about the club? That kind of talk in the middle of the night. It was impossible to say, and not many people would believe it. If you're worried about what I'll do in the middle, you can follow me. Zhong Luoqin quickly said, Listen, staying here is waiting for death. But if you listen to my arrangements, there's a chance of survival. Instead of staying here until the end, why not give it a try? In short, if you don't make yourself clear, I will never agree. Zhong Luoyun snorted coldly. It's not up to you to make decisions in the Zhong family. Zhong Luoqin bit his lip. Indeed, it was not up to him to make decisions here. Now it could be said that the situation was like a group of dragons without a leader, so it was difficult for anyone to suppress anyone. Wait a minute. At this time, an old man who had been silently accompanying the bed suddenly opened his mouth. When the old man opened his mouth, almost everyone looked at him. The old man's surname was not Zhong, but his status in the Zhong family was extraordinary, because this old man had followed old Master Zhong all his life. It could be said that half of the Zhong family's foundation was due to this old man's contribution. The old man had no children and lived a lonely life, but old Master Zhong treated him like a brother. He even said that as long as he was alive, there would be a day for the old man. He even made the 3rd generation of the Zhong family formally sign a contract and acknowledge them as his god-grandson. Grandfather Luo. Zhong Luoqin's eyes lit up as he looked at the old man. Luoqin, have you seen that person? Luoqin asked. Did you see that person? Zhong Luoqin nodded. The old man, surnamed Luo's eyes suddenly lit up, as if the dark clouds on his face were swept away. He said with full energy, What are you waiting for? Hurry up and move the old master. If anyone is slow, I'll make him unable to breathe for the rest of his life." Unexpectedly, this old man who had an extraordinary status in the Zhong family directly nodded his head in agreement. Zhong Luoyin and the Zhong family's third young lady's expression changed at the same time. Did Zhong Luoqin do something to gain grandfather Luo's trust? Luoqiu nodded to Zhang Qingrui, who was inside the car window, and said thank you. He then got off the car outside the auction venue. Zhang Qingrui originally wanted to directly bring him in, but Luoqiu felt that this would attract the attention of others. He felt that it was too troublesome, so he directly refused. After the pleasantries, Zhang Qingrui took the first step into the car and entered the venue's underground parking lot. Luoqiu took Yu Yi and followed the proper route through the entrance inspection. The security here is really lax. In the passage, Yu Yi said indifferently, "Master, if you really want that jade pendant, you can easily get it. Anyway, this place is far inferior to the palace of 10,000 treasures in France." Luoqiu looked around, but no one paid attention to Yu Ye's words. It wasn't that he didn't believe Yu Ye's words, but because he believed it too much, so he seriously denied it. "I know you've been to the Louvre, but Zhang Qingrui is my classmate in name, so I don't want to cause any trouble for her." Luoqiu shook his head. "In the end, I'm just interested in it, but I don't mean to take the other jade pendant. Besides, if it wasn't judged as the transaction fee, it couldn't be offered as a sacrifice, even if the other jade tablet was in his hands, and even if they might really be related to each other. They were originally a pair, but they had already been separated into two different concepts. Unless Luoqiu was willing to put his jade pendant into the warehouse, then his jade pendant could be released from the concept of transaction fee. "I understand." Yu Yi smiled. "Then if I get it through the normal route, it's fine, right?" "Normal route?" Luoqiu was stunned and shook his head. "I know the club has a huge amount of wealth all over the world, but the brochure clearly states that the wealth can only be used as goods in the transactions of customers. Even I can't use it privately, right?" Chapter 22. Genius remembers love in 1 second. /small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. At this moment, an old man with a ruddy complexion and white hair walked into the auction hall accompanied by a young man. The old man's face was ruddy as he walked briskly. His physique was more robust than most of the young people in society. The young man walked behind the old man and looked around, as if he was very curious about this place. "Jean, don't bother yourself with these worldly things," the old man said indifferently. The young man immediately lowered his head and withdrew his gaze with a face of reverence. However, he had followed the old man for a long time, and the two had a deep relationship. Therefore, he quickly said with a smile, "Master, after we get the High Jade Emperor Heart Seal Sutra token, if it's still early, can I walk around?" The old man suddenly glared at the young man, scaring the young man so much that his heart jumped. The old man said, "Bad disciple! How many times have I told you that you can't make a big deal out of things? There are so many demons and monsters in the world. That jade token is of great importance. If it's leaked out—" Before he finished speaking, the young man continued with a serious face, "If it's leaked out, it's bound to attract the covetous eyes of those demons and demons. There will be a reign of terror in the Jianghu, and we won't be able to cultivate peacefully. Master, am I right?" "Noisy!" The old man snorted. "From now on, shut your mouth and silently recite the Inner Heart Sutra 100 times." The young man opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. However, he really didn't dare to disobey his master's orders. He could only follow with his head lowered and silently recite the Inner Heart Sutra that he had long been tired of reciting. At this moment, a man in his 30s wearing old black-rimmed glasses suddenly fell to the ground in front of the old man, who was in a state of panic. The old man's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He supported the man with vigorous movements, but saw that the man's eyes were tightly shut, his face was pale, and his head was covered in cold sweat. The old man frowned and pressed his palm on the man's back. At the same time, he pressed hard on the man's philtrum. The man quickly woke up. What happened to me? Your inner breath suddenly became chaotic, and then your essence, chi, and spirit went out of control. If it weren't for me, you would at least be seriously ill. The old man had already stood up. The man did indeed feel a warm current flowing into his body, and the splitting headache he felt was alleviated. He hurriedly expressed his thanks. Many thanks, old mister. Thank you, sir. After the man finished speaking, he hurriedly walked into the auction house. What kind of person is this? After saving him, he didn't even say a few words and left? The young man, who couldn't stand the sight of this, said rather indignantly. The old man said indifferently, Have you finished reciting the Heart Sutra? No. I'll read it right now. The young man quickly shut his mouth. The old man acted as if nothing had happened and slowly walked into the field. Miss, the 150,000 yuan deposit has been successfully seized. If you don't buy anything in this auction, we will refund you in full. This is your plate number. Please keep it well. In addition, this is one of the original copies of the auction guarantee that you signed. Please keep it well. Also, this is my card. If there's anything, Miss can look for me at any time. Yu Yi nodded. Her expression was indifferent as she took the receipt and documents from this fellow who was said to be the auction house manager. However, she left the card behind and turned to leave. A young female receptionist who accompanied the work lowered her head and secretly laughed. She thought to herself that this woman was unbelievably beautiful. If one didn't specialize in fashion, they wouldn't be able to tell that the clothes she was wearing were new clothes from a well-known international brand that had just been released for the spring-summer fashion season. Not to mention other things. Just that simple satchel was enough for the manager's labor for half a year. Why would she take a fancy to a greasy and powdered pig head like you? It was just that she didn't know who that young man who was waiting not far away was. He was able to make this icy woman reveal a graceful and moving smile. He didn't look like the young master of a rich family. Could it be that he was being kept as a gigolo? She didn't want to either. The female receptionist's imagination ran wild. The fat manager who had been refused the door slapped the table hard at this time. Little Wang, I'll leave for a while. You take care of the work here. Don't make trouble. Yes, manager. Little Chun responded hurriedly. However, when the manager turned around, he rolled his eyes. He thought to himself, I heard that Guyu Zhai also sent a great beauty this time. Judging from his dead face, he probably wants to get close to her, but he's just a pig head. However, Little Chin didn't pay much attention to what he was made of. His white skin was painted with thick foundation, and he greeted people with a smile. Yu Yi had already walked to Luoqiu, who was waiting for her. She asked softly, What are you looking at? Oh, I just saw an interesting scene. Luoqiu smiled. He told her that he just saw an old man help a man and save the man. I don't know what happened. The man was very nervous all the time. But is that old man an old Chinese medicine doctor? Is he very good at massaging? Maybe it's a skill called qi, passed down from the ancient East. Yu Yi said softly. Luoqiu was going to ask if Qigong really existed in this world. But thinking about the existence of the club and the butterfly monster and mantis monster, it didn't seem to be a big deal. So he changed his question. Are there many people who know Qigong? It's Qi. Yu Yi corrected. To be exact, it's Qi raising and Qi controlling. It's different from the Qigong passed down by the people. As for whether there are many or not, it's hard to say. But I once heard from an Eastern Taoist cultivator who came to the club that the current Taoist cultivators are nothing compared to the past. There are probably only a few hundred of them left. Many inheritances have been lost in the change of history. Luoqiu smiled. It's probably the same as the traditional craftsmanship that has been lost. Master, it's about to start. Let's go in. Yu Yi reminded him. Luoqiu looked at the time and said, By the way, I heard that there's a deposit. How much is it? Yu Yi smiled, Not much. It's not even enough to buy a spoonful of caviar that you usually eat. Really? Luoqiu nodded. He didn't have much idea. Caviar was commonly used in high-end restaurants, but it was also sold in general packaging on the market. To be honest, Luaccio didn't know much about it, so he only had a concept. The deposit seemed to be quite humane. Luaccio reached into his pocket and touched the white jade token that he carried with him. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he found that it seemed to heat up when he entered the auction house. He wanted to take it out and have a good look, but he felt uncomfortable at this time. He turned his head and found that someone was staring at him. If he remembered correctly, it was the man who was just rescued by the old man. Yen, PS1. My stomach has been upset these 2 days. I went to the hospital for an infusion. Acute gastroenteritis. It's probably because I ate too many dumplings these days. So I'm sorry for the lack of updates. PS2. But the recommendation tickets are also increasing. It's good to be honest. I feel that these recommendation tickets are like dumplings. Even if my stomach is upset, I can still eat them. Chapter 23. Genius 1. Second, remember love, go, / little. Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. But when Luaccio turned his head, he immediately walked away in a hurry. Yuyi, who saw this scene, frowned and walked past Luaccio. She intended to follow him, but Luaccio reached out and pulled her arm. No, he doesn't mean any harm. Luaccio seemed to find it hard to accept such a statement. He thought and said, recently I always feel that my feeling in this aspect is getting more and more acute. Yuyi just said softly, if as the owner of the club you can't see through people's hearts, then it doesn't make sense. Luaccio was stunned subconsciously, knowing that it was probably one of the wonderful abilities given to him by the club. He didn't feel anything bad about seeing through people's hearts, but he didn't feel anything good about it either. Vaguely, Luaccio felt that this was not something to be happy about. Luaccio shook his head. Let's take a seat. It's written in the catalog that the jade plate should be the last few items to be auctioned. But it's also my first time to come to this kind of place. It's actually good to broaden my knowledge. He turned and smiled curiously. I often hear that buyers spend a lot of money and fight with each other at the auction. I don't know if I can see it carefully today. In fact, these two people were a very strange combination. The woman was like a dreamlike person in a painting, as if she had magical power and could capture people's souls. But the man was easy to see. Although he looked delicate and pretty, there were too many delicate and pretty people. At this time, walking with the woman, he looked extraordinarily ordinary. But the man walked in front, and the dreamlike woman followed unhurriedly. The man and woman finally found a corner to sit down, as if they didn't want to be disturbed. It was human nature to love beauty, because the beautiful Yi attracted most people's attention. Few people noticed the old man with white hair and the young man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes beside the old man. Master, I didn't expect there to be such a refined woman. The young man looked at her with some infatuation. However, the old man suddenly opened his eyes, and there seemed to be a flash of light in his eyes. He stretched out his hand and quickly formed a hand seal in front of his chest. Then he quickly tapped between the young man's eyebrows and shouted, "Shah! Master." At this time, the young man suddenly had a look of panic. The old man frowned and said, "Don't talk, recite the Heart Sutra silently. Guard the bright platform tightly. Clear away all your distracting thoughts. Don't let this pink skull ruin your Tao heart." The young man did not dare to make any mistakes, and quickly closed his eyes. The old man's eyes were like torches. At this moment, he glanced at the young man and looked at the corner with a serious expression. What a charming technique! Who is this woman? His essence, chi and spirit are all gone, like a wandering ghost, but he's not a demon. Hopefully, it wasn't one of those unorthodox sections. The old man thought of many things in an instant. He had come here this time to obtain something. That thing was rumored to have been lost for hundreds of years. This time, the old man accidentally discovered it. However, he could not be sure that no one else came here with the same purpose. The old man took a deep breath and formed a hand seal again. Then he pinched his fingers into a sword sign and quickly wiped his eyes. He opened his eyes again and looked at the corner. This time, he suddenly met the woman's eyes. The sapphire blue eyes were as deep as the ocean. The moment they made contact, the old man's spirit seemed to have been swallowed into a huge whirlpool. His face turned pale and his expression was horrified. He could only bite the tip of his tongue and barely pull himself out of the whirlpool. However, he was already sweating and frightened. His breath was chaotic, as if he was seriously ill. The old man quickly calmed down and murmured, using the superior Taoist martial arts to transmit his voice, "I'm Yang Taizi, may I know who you are?" "Monks from the East? Put away your poor vigilance. Don't spoil my master's mood, or I'll dig up your mountain humph." The woman's humph was like a great bell above the ninth heaven. It directly shook Yang Taizi's mind and made him uneasy. He almost vomited a fishy smell. If not for the solid foundation of the pure yang skill that he had cultivated for 60 or 70 years, he would have been in danger of being possessed by the devil. However, the terrifying spirit had disappeared without a trace. Yang Taizi's face became worse. He slowly adjusted his breath while thinking, "When did such a powerful person come here?" "What's more," she sounded like a servant. The old man took a deep breath and took out his phone. He opened the Penguin app and logged in to his QQ account. His fingers moved like lightning as he began to use the handwriting input method to write. "Fellow Taoists, have you ever heard of a woman who is as beautiful as a fairy with blue eyes and black hair? Her spirit is abnormally strong, and her charm technique is extremely sharp? Urgent, waiting online. She'll come back in the evening. Don't cook." Luocho also replied to Ren Xilin's message for the nth time. He raised his head and asked in confusion, "Yu Yi, did you say anything just now? I think I heard some strange sounds, but I didn't hear it clearly." "Well, I didn't say anything." Yu Yi smiled slightly. "Really?" Luocho nodded. At this time, the auctioneer was already on the stage, speaking with a microphone. "Thank you for coming. It's my honor to be the auctioneer of this auction." After the lengthy speech, it was time for the first item to be auctioned. Luocho glanced at the price. The starting price was 30,000 yuan. He couldn't help mocking himself. It seems that the starting price of millions or tens of millions is really not easy to see. I heard that in some foreign high-end auctions, there would be transactions of more than 100 million yuan. When my shuttle ability is stronger, I'll take some time to have a look. Luocho was quite interested, listening to the auctioneer's tireless introduction of each item. At this moment, he suddenly had an idea. It's time for me to learn some knowledge in this field. The club conveniently provided him with the ability to identify items, but judging from the white jade plate, the identification was not for Anika. If he was asked to sacrifice his life in exchange for information, he would really be cheated to death. Should I ask Zhang Qingrui to recommend some books suitable for beginners? Since we are classmates, it shouldn't be a problem, right? As he continued to think and watch, it was finally time for the purpose of his visit to appear. The projection on the stage showed several photos taken from different angles of the white jade plate, and at the same time the auctioneer began to speak enthusiastically. "The next item is the 27th item provided by Guyu Shai. I believe that all of you have already known some information about this jade plate. Everyone, please look at the back of the jade plate. We can faintly see the two characters, Zhigang, engraved in the seal script." The mood of the scene seemed to be rising. The magnesium light shone on the white jade plate, and some guests started to take photos without hesitation. The auctioneer smiled. "I believe that all of you are familiar with this inscription. Now, I can tell you with certainty that this white jade plate indeed came from the jade maker of the Ming Dynasty. The origin of this white jade plate is unknown, but according to the magazine attached to the jade plate, it can be guaranteed to be 500 years old." After showing the certificate of age and the material of the jade plate, the auctioneer immediately banged the mallet. The starting price of this white jade plate is 550,000 yuan. Each increment is 10,000 yuan. 550,000 yuan going once. Someone has raised her card. It's Miss A66 over there. Looking at you, Yi elegantly raising the number plate in her hand, Luocio. Luocio just looked at it without saying anything. His bank card was almost all the New Year's money, red packets and pocket money over the years. Although the club was very rich, so rich that Luocio was stunned when he saw the circle to the left of the decimal point for a while. He couldn't use that wealth, so he could only look at it and sigh. Therefore, he still only had the money in his bank card, which was more than 10,000 yuan at most. Yi, could it be that you are actually a rich woman? Yi still had that smile that Luocio couldn't grasp. What's Yes is naturally masters. Luocio was stunned and said in astonishment, probably most men would like to hear this sentence, right? But he shook his head and continued, since it's already sold, then if possible, try to buy it back. Luocio wasn't a hesitant person. Since this was a normal way to get it, then it wasn't a bad idea to buy it back directly. He didn't think it was a problem to use Ye's money. Yi had lived for more than 300 years and had experienced the changes of time. With the existence of the club behind her, it wasn't hard to imagine that she could accumulate some extraordinary wealth. It was the same reason. As long as he had this thought, he could also accumulate a huge amount of wealth in the future. Therefore, if the white jade token was bought by someone else, it would be more troublesome. Luocio was inherently afraid of trouble. 560,000 yuan. A 45 bid 560,000 yuan. Is there anyone higher than 560,000 yuan? 560,000 yuan going once. 570,000 yuan. A 66 bid 570,000 yuan. Anyone else? Anyone else? 580,000 yuan. A 51 bid 580,000 yuan going once. Seeing the auctioneer shouting to his heart's content, Yi seemed to be impatient. She directly stood up and said in a clear voice, "No need to bother, 1,000,000 yuan." This number was actually nothing in the eyes of the truly rich. But at this moment, the moment this dreamlike woman stood up, almost all the eyes in the hall were drawn to her. The men's eyes couldn't move away from this beautiful figure. As for the women, for the first time, they didn't feel disdain in their hearts. They secretly thought that this was a kind of beauty that made people feel ashamed of their own inferiority. On the other side, the old man in the corner wanted to raise the number plate in his hand several times, but as if a mountain was pressing down on him, he was stunned and broke out in cold sweat. At the same time, he was even more shocked in his heart. The old man knew that the charm emitted from this woman's body had captivated everyone except the auctioneer, who wasn't affected at all. This skill was really controlled to the pinnacle of perfection. Not only that, he was also constantly under that kind of huge mental pressure, and his Tao heart was on the verge of collapse. 1,000,000 yuan going thrice. Sold. This white jade, Zgang, token belongs to this lady from A66. The hammer was hammered down. But at this moment, a figure suddenly rushed out of the hall. He rushed up to the stage, reached out and grabbed the white jade token in his hand, and then ran to the side of the emergency exit. At this moment, the security guards seemed to have panicked. They held their batons and quickly chased after him. Luocio frowned. He saw that Yi was angry. Chapter 24. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. The auction was forced to stop on the spot, and a group of people stayed at the scene to wait for news. While he was thinking, a worker came to Luocio's side. Accompanied by him, Luocio and Yi came to the side door of the venue and found that there were already several people waiting there. Luocio was familiar with Zhang Qingrui, a fat man in his early 30s and a woman in her 50s. Luocio, this is Miss Dong, the host of the auction, and this is Manager Han, who is in charge of the scene. Zhang Qingrui quickly explained, "I'm sorry your friend's item was stolen halfway. In any case, we will get it back as soon as possible." That is to say, you haven't found it yet? Luocho asked after a moment of silence. The woman, surnamed Dong, looked at Luocho from head to toe. They had been watching the auction through the backstage video. The first person who bid a high price for the jade plate left a deep impression on them. Zhang Qingrui seemed to know the other party, so she had some feelings for him. The other party bid for the item, but it was stolen, so she felt sorry for him. Therefore, Ms. Dong had to say kindly, "Mr. Luo, please don't worry. We have called the police. The thief can't escape." Luocho was stunned and said without thinking, "Don't tell me he walked out of the venue." Zhang Qingrui felt embarrassed. "I'm afraid that guy has a plan. We found a fire passage, and the lock of the door was broken. Then someone saw the thief leave on a motorcycle from the east wing, so he must have prepared in advance." Luocho shook his head. If he was in his own city, he could probably go to the man's side with a thought, but he was not so flexible in a city. He didn't have a good idea at the moment. Besides, he didn't lose anything. Although the bidding was successful, he hadn't paid yet. "I don't care what method you use. We will leave by plane tonight. You'd better give me an explanation before the evening." Yi suddenly said indifferently, "It's your fault that the security here was lax. We like that jade tablet, so we want to buy it. There's a saying in the East that goes, 'No amount of money can buy a good heart.' This isn't something that can be solved with just compensation." We understand. Manager Han quickly said with an apologetic smile. "Even if you are in a hurry to leave tonight, our treasure auction house will not let this go unresolved. Once we can find the jade token, we will deliver it to you no matter what method we use." Ms. Dong and Qingrui Zhang both thought to themselves, "This woman has such a strong aura that makes people unable to raise their heads." This was not something that any rich family's daughter could do. Zhang Qingrui couldn't help but look at Luocho with a troubled expression. Luocho could only turn to Yu Yi and say, "Since the item has been taken away, there's nothing we can do. We're not interested in the rest." "Well, Zhang Qingrui, you should have my phone number. If there's any news here, just let me know. Yu Yi, there's still some time. Let's go somewhere else to have a look. Do you want to come here again?" The club servant girl nodded obediently to Luocho, but when she looked at Zhang Qingrui and the other two, her eyes were as sharp as the Siberian wind. Seeing the two walking towards the exit, Ms. Dong sighed. Subconsciously, "Qingrui, who is this girl? I've seen a lot of powerful women in my life, but I've never seen one like this. I don't even dare to take a deep breath." Zhang Qingrui smiled bitterly. "Auntie Dong, to be honest, I'm also confused. I only know that she's Luocho's friend. She should be his girlfriend." "Then that guy?" Auntie Dong asked curiously. Zhang Qingrui didn't want to say more. "He's my classmate. Although we're classmates, we're not close." Auntie Dong nodded. She was smart enough to know that Zhang Qingrui was being perfunctory, but this made her more curious about the identity of this young man and woman. Auntie Dong shook her head. "Let's find the lost item first. I, Dong Minghua, am not a woman who will be bullied." "Humph." Luocho called a taxi with the app. While waiting outside the venue, Yu Yi said softly, "Master, I didn't do my job well. I'm sorry." Luocho gave a start. "It's nothing. After all, not everyone can foresee this happening. Besides, there are so many surveillance cameras here that guy can't escape. Anyway, the deposit is returned to you, so we didn't lose anything. But if it wasn't for that guy, the jade plate would be yours now." Luocho said happily, "But isn't it more interesting now? Why did that guy take the jade plate? Does he know something about the jade plate that no one else knows? This is much more valuable than simply getting the jade plate." The taxi driver had started to stop. Luocho smiled. "Let's go. I probably know which direction that guy escaped to." Yu Yi opened her mouth, confusedly. Luocho took out the jade plate in his hand. "This thing has been hot since just now. When I touched it, I felt something." He walked towards the taxi, muttering, "Maybe I don't need to reduce my lifespan to know what the jade plate is. in a remote cargo hold. The man wearing black glasses was holding a white jade tablet in a daze. He kept repeating, "I found you, I finally found you. I found you. I found you." He rubbed the small jade plate again and again, without knowing how much time had passed, as if he was the only one left in the world with this white jade plate. Suddenly, he heard the sound of footsteps. He looked up and saw a man and a woman appear in front of him out of nowhere. The man suddenly panicked, holding the white jade plate in his hand tightly. He seemed to have some impression of this young man who suddenly appeared. He had seen this young man at the auction, so he said subconsciously, "It's you!" Luo Qiu was a little disappointed. "I've been waiting for you here for half an hour, and then I didn't hear anything other than, 'I found you,' constantly repeating, 'I found you.' I had no choice but to come out." What do you want to do? Do you want to take it away from me?" The man became more nervous, like a lion or tiger protecting its cub. Luoqiu took out his white jade plate, shaking it. "Can you tell me what's the secret of this thing?" The man gave a start, then said with ecstasy, "I knew it! I knew it! There's another one. I felt it when I saw you. I felt it. Sure enough, it's on you. Give it to me." The man suddenly rushed towards Luoqiu like a madman. But before he could get it, Yu Yi had already put it on the ground. The man painfully covered his stomach. Because of the violent impact, he wanted to vomit. "Master, he's just an ordinary person," Yu Yi whispered in Luoqiu's ear. Luoqiu thought for a while, squatting down. "Sir, I don't mean any harm. I just want to know what this thing is. Also, I want you to understand that this thing was bought by us at the auction, so it should belong to us in theory. But you snatched it away." The man gasped for breath, saying with difficulty, They belong to me. Not you, not any of you." Luoqiu frowned. "As far as I know, the jade plate you snatched originally belonged to Guyu Zhai, then it was sent to the auction. As for the one in my hand, I'm afraid it's not yours, right?" "It's mine." The man suddenly opened his eyes. "They all belong to me. 500 years ago, they all belonged to me." Luoqiu gave a start. 500 years ago. The man suddenly smiled bitterly. "Do you believe in past and present lives?" Yen PS1. The Z-Gang card really has a Z-Gang card. In history, there was a very famous jade craftsman called Lu Z-Gang in the Ming Dynasty. Well, this is a fictional story, so although it's a Z-Gang card, please don't take it personally. After all, it's just a story. If there's any similarity, it's purely fictional. Probably. Laugh PS2. You woke up early in the morning to write. Don't you want to give me a recommendation vote? PS3. I can't afford to play with red packets, and I don't want to play with red packets. Because he felt that the recommendations and collections that were obtained this way would lose the original flavor that they should have. But I still wish you all get more red packets, because I will also pick up the money on the ground. Laugh.